Marriage secrets exposed. What these husbands do that makes them absolute keepers. Kindness under stress beats butterflies in your stomach. Choose the partner who listens, apologizes without excuses, and shares in the not-so-raunchy stuff like chores and budgets. Quiet, daily respect ends up feeling like real romance. Mine has made a few grand gestures in his time, but the most special to me is that he always fills my water bottle with icy water just how I like it right before I get home, so it's waiting for me. We got married before either of us could afford nice jewelry, so I still have my plain silver engagement ring, but every ice cube in that bottle is like a 20-carat VVS diamond to me. Loves me unconditionally, cleans around the house, supports everything I've ever done, looks at me as if I created the sun, spends as much time with me as possible, figures out what I need before I do, talks to me and about me as if I'm the greatest person he's ever met in his life, makes me laugh, still makes me blush after nearly 10 years, can still give me goosebumps and makes me smile when I'm crying. It's a lot of things. Some of them are small and some of them are large, but he's always been there and I can't imagine going through the rest of this life with anyone else. We have been having an absolutely terrible month, with a layoff and a parent being deathly sick amongst other tragic happenings. So all of the responses people sent to this absolutely made our day. I hope all of you find the kind of love in your lives that you deserve. Veteran husband and father here. Helping around the house and helping out as much as you can is the kind and caring thing to do. It amazes me that men don't realize that it also leads to more time spent together. He's so ferociously on my side no matter what. He makes me laugh until my stomach hurts, but he's also so kind and helpful to those around him. We were at a wedding a few years back, and while walking into the reception area, one of the waiters dropped an entire cart of plates that shattered everywhere. Everyone walked right past or just around the guy. Not my husband, though. He stopped and helped that man pick up every single plate. He does things like this often, and every time I'm reminded how incredibly lucky I am. Does it ever get to the point where it's annoying? Don't get me wrong, he sounds like a wonderful person, but I'm just imagining just wanting to go to the grocery store and having to stop for the third time in half an hour because another old woman needs to be helped across the road. Just let her cross by herself, Darren. The kids need dinner. I've been sick for the last week, and he has spoon-fed me soup and ice cream when I was too dizzy to do it myself. I love flowers, but I love them outside so they don't die as fast. He landscaped every inch of our property and added planters so I could have as many flowers as I want. He's grown plants from a cutting so that I could have them. I came into the marriage with an elderly cat. When the cat was dying, he'd intermittently get diarrhea and need baths. My husband would get up in the middle of the night and bathe the cat so I could rest for work. He slept on the floor with the cat in the cat's final days. When we met, he said he didn't really like cats. He loves to cook. I can't tell you the last time I cooked dinner. I'll do the dishes, I'll scrub a toilet, but I hate cooking. He'll cook anything with a smile. He knows my parents, who live with us, don't tolerate spicy food. Sometimes he cooks 2 different dinners so we can have something spicy and they won't. My parents live with us and he tolerates everything that comes with that. When they're injured, he'll help out with everything, from assembling crutches to getting medication to helping in the bathroom. He handles it all with tact, grace, patience, and empathy. He even helps the elderly neighbors when they're in need. Taking care of me? Yeah, that's nice. Take care of my elderly cat? Oh, baby, that's the man. I ended my relationship with an elderly hedgehog. They usually live about 5 years, give or take. Mine lived to more than 8 years old. When my little guy passed, I was beside myself. I called my man sobbing while he was at work. He came home immediately and wrapped up his little body for me. I just couldn't. Drove me an hour away to my mom's property, because I lived in an apartment at the time, and he dug the hole himself. My mom's yard is 90% gravel and 10% soil, so that was a tough job. He didn't complain once. Let me sit and cry over his little grave as long as I needed. Then he drove us home. That's when I was 100% sure I picked the right man. It's really nice to see these kinds of questions and these kinds of responses. It's a tough world out there. I'm glad that some folks are happy. When the kids were babies, my husband used to come home from work, take over care of the kids, and told me to go out for an hour just for me. I'd go to Target or to the mall and just walk around to de-stress from being at home all day with the kids. I didn't know anyone else whose husbands did that, and I felt really loved knowing that he was thinking of me and how stressful my days at home were. That 5 hours a week to myself really helped keep me sane when the kids were little. Takes amazing care of our kid. Great dad. Spends a lot of time with him. He dotes on me. He'll bring me stuff from the kitchen when I'm feeling lazy. Listens to me. Cares about my feelings. Makes me happy in the bedroom like it's his job. And he laughs at my jokes. What more could I want? I'm truly so lucky. Same. Guys, notice there's nothing here about expensive gifts. I mean, those are nice, but without the above list, they're hollow. My husband ruined my favorite sweater by leaving it in the washer overnight, and the dyes bled. When he saw how upset I was, he didn't try to invalidate my feelings or get defensive. He just apologized and got me a replacement sweater. I've never had to feel worried that my emotions would make my partner resent me. He just honestly listens and repairs things. Every time I turned the shower on, he'd immediately go and pop a towel and fresh clothes in the dryer and listen for me to turn the shower off and bring me a warm towel and clothes to change into. He died 8 years ago, and I still cry getting in and out of the shower. I can't believe I'm going to tell this story, but here I go. It was just this one thing my husband did. We lost our dog to cancer about 6 months before we listed our house for sale. This dog was my soul dog, and I couldn't bear to leave her at our old house. My husband and brother-in-law dug her up. She was buried in heavy canvas and probably plastic-lined in a burial bag, placed her in a large tote, put her on a trailer, and drove the hour to our new house. Then they dug a grave in the prettiest spot up on a hill and reburied her. We've been married for 27 years, and he's been an amazing husband and dad, but this was the moment I knew I'd really won the husband and in-law lottery. I joke around with my daughters that when it comes to husbands, they need to find the man who's willing to dig up their dead dog. He patiently listens to me blather on about the weirdest crap even after 12 years of me blathering on about the weirdest crap. He's willing to be silly. He treats me as an equal partner. He loves the pets as much as I do, and he's of the highest moral fiber. No, we're not religious. He also has extremely high fiscal literacy, which takes the weight of financial anxiety off my shoulders. He brings me coffee in bed every morning. Well, actually, he should really bring it in a mug instead. That's much more practical. He cooks, does the dishes and grocery shopping, and the amount he's helped me postpartum is incredible. I've read stories of men not helping with injuries after birth, and mine helped me like it was nothing. He took care of my stitches and cleaned my bloody laundry without batting an eye. Okay, maybe marriage isn't so bad. I just needed to see this today because social media feeds on the negatives of marriage and cheating men too much when these are women's thoughts about their husbands. We need to normalize seeing this side of marriage. It's worth noting that happy women aren't as interested in spending time on social media bragging about it, as compared to unhappy women trying to spew hate. There are tons of women happily married to great men, but social media will have you believe it's a rare minority and that all men are trash. While I agree that it's nice to see the positive side, and that's why I wanted to use this topic, I do have to say that writing off all people with complaints as just wanting to spew hate and discredit all men is a bit of a jump. People who complain about cheating partners are generally angry at their partners, not advocating to chemically neuter an entire gender. There are just a few extremes in men and women who take their disillusionment with an entire gender to the next level. I have to echo that lady earlier who talked about how great her partner was postpartum. The amount of bloody stuff and bandages my husband has dealt with, like a champ, it just leaves me speechless. After COVID, I coughed so hard and so long, literally for over a year, that my lungs were separating from my ribs and I had basically zero bladder control. I remember crying in the bathroom because every time I coughed, I wet my pants, and I couldn't deal with it anymore. He asked what I needed, and I told him I needed diapers. I was sobbing, so ashamed and embarrassed and exhausted. He asked me what size and if I had a brand preference, and I just sobbed that I had no idea. I'd never used them before. He put me in the shower and went to the store and came back with a package and a box of my favorite ice cream bars. He never brought it up again. Just last month we were on vacation and my period arrived unexpectedly. He left me to take a nap and just went to the corner shop to get me tampons, and again returned with my favorite ice cream bar. He's been rock solid through 2 surgeries, long-term illness, and a cancer scare, never complaining or being grossed out, just a calming presence and asking me what I need. It's just clear that he adores me, and I adore him too. My husband slept on the floor next to our son's crib for the first 10 months of his life, doing all of the night feeds. I was a stay-at-home mum, and he had to get up and go to work every day. I wasn't healing well physically or mentally from a traumatic birth, but he really showed up for us. I'll never forget his kindness when I was at my most vulnerable. Both our son and I think he hung the moon. I just read a book called Lucky by a British celebrity. I finished it last night. It's basically a journey through her traumatic birth experience, and good God, what some women have to go through with birth is horrific. You just reminded me of it. Her partner seems really great too. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My husband is the absolute sweetest thing. Every day when he gets home from work, we do our 1-minute hug to get the oxytocin flowing. I can feel my breathing and heartbeat slow down. Big sigh. You're home. All is right with my world. Then we take a bath together. When I lie back to wet my hair, he massages my face and leans down periodically to give me an upside-down kiss. A face massage is the most exquisite thing. It makes me feel treasured. He helps me get the soap and conditioner out of my hair and massages my neck and shoulders at the same time. His touch is the most amazing thing. I've been in relationships in the past where the only time my partner ever touched me was when he wanted to do the deed. Under those circumstances, it was hard to enjoy it because I felt pressure. This is so different. We touch each other all day long. I always feel as if I have all the time in the world to enjoy something because he genuinely enjoys making me feel good. This man will play with my hair for an hour. It's not just a means to an end. If it heats up, great. If not, that's okay too. It's a funny thing though. The freedom to say no without having to deal with any sulking makes it so much easier for me to want to say yes. We do the deed more than a lot of couples decades younger. I'm menopausal, but my desire has yet to fade. It's like an upward spiral. He makes me so happy that I'm always looking for ways to make him happy. We're both so grateful for each other that we're always thinking of little ways to surprise each other. He's honestly never mean to me. His voice always sounds so happy when he answers the phone, no matter what kind of day he's having. We never get crappy with each other. Never ever. It's never me against him or him against me. It's us against the problem. He expresses appreciation for things that I do. He brags about me to other people. He's done all kinds of things for my grown children that he surely didn't have to. He does his share around the house without me having to nag or write him a list. He's patient when my mental or physical health isn't the best, and he encourages me to do the things I love. He makes me laugh. My husband is the best person I've ever known. The only thing I regret is not marrying him sooner. The only thing I fear is losing him. Forever won't be long enough to love him. Silly answer. He'll always chop the onions for me so I don't have to cry the whole way through. And serious answer, he treats me as a full human being and equal partner in a culture which increasingly seems to not want to do so. Also, we're in our 50s now, but we've known each other since freshman year of high school. If something ever happens to him, ye gods forbid, I'd never be able to replicate the sheer amount of shared history and in-jokes that we have with another future partner. This man knows and accepts every part of me, good or bad. He's kind. He's a model husband and father. He's interesting and has hobbies of his own. He makes sure I'm happy. He cares. I love that man like nobody can. He moves mountains, then pounds them to ground again. When it comes to household maintenance and chores, he doesn't believe in gender roles and he just does half, without me asking. Does chores when he notices they need to be done too. Treats me with respect and doesn't whine or argue if I'm not in the mood for romance. Instead he'll say something like, well, you're hot and I'm going to think about you while I take care of myself. Which sometimes, like if I'm just a little too tired, is enough to change my mind. Listens to me and changes his behavior when I tell him something's bothering me. Like he grew up in a pretty unaffectionate household with no praise, so I had to tell him, hey, I could use a little bit of compliments once in a while, and it took him a while to get comfortable doing that, but he put in the effort even when it made him feel awkward. We have a lot of similar but not quite the same hobbies, and he makes it easy for me to do his hobbies with him, if that makes sense. Like he loves going on long bike rides, but he knows I hate and struggle with cardio. So when I told him I was thinking about getting an e-bike to commute, he got super excited and did a bunch of research and helped me pick one out, and got me a backup battery so I could do long trips with him effortlessly. He pushes me to grow and calls me out, gently and in private if I'm being crappy. I mean, so many things. He makes me feel cared about, respected, listened to, and beautiful every day. Having a partner with a good way of effectively confronting you on your problematic behavior from time to time without making you feel like crap is a real win. Coming out of those feelings like you've learned something about yourself or your partner is a sign that it's being done right. He will rub or massage my ache or sore muscle that I have any time of day, and there's no racy remarks that come with it. 4th time pregnant currently, and I have him rubbing my lower back every day. Never a complaint, always seems happy to assist in any kind of relief he can bring to me. I am so appreciative. So, I'm a sleepy gal, and I usually go to bed early, way earlier than my husband, who's a night owl. Earlier this summer, I woke up on a Saturday and walked past our teenage son's room. It was oddly cleaner than it had been the day before. I realized it was spotless, like sanitized, and my son is not in his bed. I find my son asleep on the couch in a cozy pallet, and I see the dreaded tiny trash can beside him. Turns out my son caught the stomach flu and rained the contents of his stomach over the side of his loft bed at 1 a.m., basically drenching every square inch of his bedroom in vom. He ended up throwing up all over the hallway and the bathroom too. Besides my kids sleeping in another location with a bucket beside him though, I would have never known what happened. That's how well the house had been cleaned. My husband patiently tended to our sick kid for hours and then sanitized half the house while I blissfully slept, completely unaware of the chaos and mess. And in the morning, he was just like, no biggie. No resentment or irritation towards me for not waking up, just concern for our guy. And that's just who he is. All in, hands-on, so nurturing and selfless and so loving. I have a million stories or examples that would prove how lucky I am, but this one really made me stop and appreciate what an amazing partner he is. I'm so happy for all of you. You all truly deserve this happiness. I'm heartbroken for the women reading these with tears in their eyes. Believe me, I feel ya. He's interested in the things I care about, not to the point where he'll take on those things as his own hobbies, but enough to remember the storyline or characters or tropes. He's currently dressed as Booth in a suit because I'm dressed as Bones for a convention. Short version, he likes me, as a friend, so he's nice to me. He adores our kids. He bought all of their back-to-school stuff, uniforms, new shoes, and school bags, with no input from me. He has his crap together and makes us dinner. Makes me laugh. He's getting hotter even after 15 years together. Supports me in my career. I ran up the aisle when we married, and I'd do it again. After I had the baby, he did all of the night shifts because we were trying to fight my postpartum, and sleeping helped me. He encouraged me to go back to school and put all of his dreams on hold until I finished and started my career in engineering. He brags about me to everyone, his students, fellow co-workers, family, and friends. He's my biggest cheerleader, hands down. He's such a good dad. When our daughter came out to us as trans, he spoke at every single school board meeting as they attempted to strip away her rights. He'd spent long days driving back and forth to our state capital to speak at committee meetings over anti-trans bills. He went to rallies, and he wasn't just doing it for our kid, but for all of his students as well. He rubs my back almost every single night, and he cooks me my favorite meals when I ask. He's the one that picks up the dog doo in the backyard. As a man and husband, I'm both reassured and slightly depressed at how basic a lot of these answers are. You know, it's the small things that mean the most after all. If you're a bad partner 80% of the time, a spontaneous trip to Disneyland isn't going to fix that, you know? People want to feel safe and know that you have their back when they need it. I am desperately in love with my husband. Here's just a few of the many wonderful things about him. He supports every single hobby I have without fail. He built me a huge garden, hung shelves, thrifted a sewing machine, went back to used bookstores. If I love it, he's pumped about it. He often shows up at the house or my workplace with coffee, flowers, or candy, and also brings things for my friends and co-workers as well. For no reason, just because it's Tuesday. He gives me back and foot rubs without me asking. It took me a long time to believe that he genuinely just enjoys touching me and making me feel great. He literally will not leave the room without kissing me and saying he loves me, just in case. When we disagree, he shares his feelings openly, and we communicate about the problem. I'm a survivor of a pretty unsafe childhood, and I have a lot of trauma around men yelling at me, or talking down to me amongst other stuff. My husband would never raise his voice or hand to me, and he makes me feel safe. Truly a kind soul with no dark baggage to work through. He makes me feel like the light of his life, just like he is mine. I have bipolar disorder, ADHD, and some other neuro stuff going on. He's quite neurotypical. Whenever I get hyper-focused or depressed or manic, he just toughs it out. I am messy, but I don't mean to be, and he's very patient with me. He helps me come up with a cleaning schedule that we tackle together. He knows me so well, my quirks, my habits, how I think, and it's truly the greatest expression of love I've ever seen. He will say that I'm a chaos goblin and call me perfect in the same sentence. He's literally the glue that holds me together. 1. Does the grocery shopping, cooks, and cleans the kitchen every day. 2. Moisturizes my skin after I take a shower. 3. Rubs my feet every night. And 4. Compliments me and gives me lots of cuddles. When I was diagnosed with stage 4 chest cancer, he cried so much that the doctor had to console him. And he's just been doing everything for me ever since and reminding me of how important I am and how strong I am while going through treatment. I've talked to lots of women whose husbands treated them like crap after diagnosis, including cheating on them. So many tiny things that add up to a wonderful partner. He always gives me a kiss goodnight, makes coffee on mornings that I sleep in, hides my favorite candy in spots that I'll find it when he's out of town, and unfailingly asks me if I need anything when he's headed to the grocery store. He's so loving with our cats, he listens to me when I need to talk something out, he's down to try weird stuff with me like sensory deprivation chambers, he takes a day off on my days off so that we can walk on the beach, and is an amazing cook. He's so funny and will egg on my terrible humor, and he does this thing where he cracks my middle toe every day.
People who have met their online friends, what made you instantly regret it? Met my best friend at the time on League of Legends. After talking every day for 3 years, I ended up moving to a state much closer to him, so we decided to finally meet. We talked about all the things we'd do together and how awesome it would be. I loved him so much. He was there for me through so much and was a wonderful friend. He had a new girlfriend at the time of our meetup and he brought her along with him. I had no problem with this because I'd love to meet the woman who makes him happy. It was abundantly clear from the get-go that she wasn't a real big fan of me. I did my best to be kind and still had tons of fun. I didn't hear from my friend much after that. A mutual good friend of ours messaged me, and when I asked about my best friend, they said his girlfriend was telling people that I was basically an awful person for whatever reason. 3 years later and he's engaged to this woman, and I'm happy for him, but I haven't spoken to him in those 3 years. I still miss him every day, and I wish I could be there for him on his wedding day. Not instant regret, but did make me realize things could have gone badly if this friend hadn't been a good human. There was a guy I used to play Halo 2 with all the time. We were playing Halo one day and I made some off-the-wall comment about how bad traffic was due to them redoing one of our local roads. He said his town was redoing a lot of roads too. I think I had a friend over or coming over and I forgot to mute my mic and said the road he lived on, asking when he had to leave to come over. Anyways, my Xbox buddy was like, "Holy crap, do you live in XYZ?" And I told him, yeah. Turns out he lived like 5 miles away from me on the other side of town. We ended up meeting up and I was about 11 or 12 at the time. He was like 17. And he went and bought me a burger and milkshake and we chatted. Pretty cool dude from what I remember. But when I got home that night, I thought about how different that could have been if he wasn't just some high schooler trying to make a kid's night with a burger and shake. My brother met a girl in person that he'd known for 4 or 5 years online, during which time they kind of had an online relationship. She had brought her friend with her to meet him, and while they were sitting around a table awkwardly making conversation, with my brother apparently quite shocked at how bad she looked in person compared to how she looked online, and having absolutely no interest in her other than as friends, the girl sent her friend a message saying, "Oh my god, get me out of here, he's looking at me like he wants to jump me." But she accidentally sent it to my brother. What ensued was likely incredibly painful to be a part of. My brother showed her his phone and looked at her in disgust. Met a girl I really liked on World of Warcraft, but she lived in another country. After a couple of vacations there, it turned into a relationship. I made the decision to move and start a new life there with her. After living there for 4 months, I slowly realized she was crazy as hell. Huge mood swings paired with a lot of aggression. I ended up getting stabbed in the side by her while asleep. Needless to say, after getting out of the hospital, I took the first plane back home. She's still in a psychiatric hospital. I have a weird story about a lesbian I met online and eventually IRL. For reference, I'm a bi girl. We started talking after I made a comment on a lesbian forum about being a single lesbian mom. I still didn't know if I was bi or lesbian at the time. We started messaging a lot, hundreds of texts a day. This included some sexy messages and pictures too. But she was always obsessed with my daughter, like almost demanding pictures of her and updates on her. Eventually, we arranged to meet up. When we finally see each other in person, she looks shocked and asks where my daughter was. I said she was being babysat by my mom so we can have a date. I could tell this threw her off a little bit. After our date, we start hooking up at my place. Even then, she was still asking about her. "After this, can I meet her? Will you let me babysit? Do you think she'll start calling me mommy?" I was like, chill, she's 1.5. This, combined with her being obsessed with my daughter's stuff, including stealing a pacifier, a dirty onesie, and going through the diaper pail, I decided this lady's crazy. She ended up stalking me for a while, but I was moving back in with my mom anyway, so I managed to escape. I was 13 and had a 20-year-old pen pal in Hong Kong, both of us female. We met on Tumblr and emailed each other regularly. My parents were CC'd in all of our correspondence, and we basically just talked about our cultures. About a year of us talking went by, and she said that her university allowed her to study abroad in Europe for a semester, and she chose my country. Fun! I was excited. However, some time went by and our friendship kind of faded, to the point where I had forgotten she was even coming to my country. About 2 weeks before she was supposed to come, she emailed me that her student accommodation had to be cleaned out, so she couldn't access it on the night she arrived. She needed a place to stay for one night. I asked my mom and she agreed to pick her up from the airport with me and that she could stay with us for one night. I mean, we trusted this girl. I was very open about my friendship with her. We had pictures and everything. So 2 weeks later, we pick her up from the airport, and we didn't click. She kind of annoyed me, but it was late and so we just went home. We get home and get her settled. We went up to my room and she gave me some presents and we chat a little bit. She then says, "Thanks for letting me stay here this semester." Huh? Excuse me? This semester? I asked her like, what do you mean? You can stay here tonight. We can see each other during the weekends if you want to hang out, but you can't stay here. She goes quiet. We go to sleep. At this point, I just wanted her to go away, and I got what I wanted. The next morning, I wake up and she's gone. I don't even know how she got out because we locked the doors at night, but she just vanished. We have special locks that you need a key for to open, and the key was somewhere else in the house. Her suitcase was still there. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. She eventually texted me, asking if my mother could drop off her suitcase at a train station 40 minutes away at a certain time. My mother brought the suitcase, and that was that. Never seen her or spoken to her again after that. Now that I think about it, I have a theory about why this went down like it did. She most likely put my address on her visa application as her place of residency during her stay, and needed to stay in my house in case immigration was going to check if she was actually there. When I was in high school, I met a guy from a different high school in a local chat room. We hit it off, and after a few days, we agreed to meet up at the store I worked at once I finished work. Well, I guess he showed up a little early with a friend and came through my check stand. I thought it was him since we'd swapped photos, but I was really shy and didn't want to be wrong. I waited for him to introduce himself, but he never did, and he and his friend paid for whatever they had and left without conversation. I was still hopeful that wasn't the guy, so I waited for him for an hour after my shift. Of course, he never showed, because that absolutely was the guy. He must have been disappointed when he met me in the checkout line, and instead of being a decent person and saying he wasn't interested, he just ghosted me. If I could go back in time, I definitely would have said something to him at the check stand. That's my one regret. When I was 14, I had an online friend 2 states away who was 14. He and his mom took a trip to see me, and the first thing we did when we saw each other was run full speed at one another. Our heads bounced off each other and I chipped my tooth and broke his braces. I'm pretty sure his front tooth was also loose and had to go to the dentist to fix it. A friend I had for 6 years flies over to Australia to hang with me for a month. Little did I know, he was a little bit taller than me. I was 5'10". He was, well, 6'7". I never knew he was this tall. He never talked about it. And when I was at the Brisbane airport waiting for him, I texted him stating, "I don't know where you are," to which he replied, "Look up." Towering over everyone is this blonde guy that has the arm span of the airport lobby. I cried, we laughed, and I regret bringing him over because my ceiling almost hits his head. It was my friend Kate who befriended this girl Jessica, who allowed us to come and stay with her when we traveled to the US. Jessica was rude to me instantly and kept my friend away from me. I'd go upstairs and she'd find a reason for them to go downstairs. She had Kate share her bedroom and she'd lock the door for hours, so I'd just go off and do my own thing. We met her 2 odd friends and they both ignored me. When it was time for Kate and I to move on to another state, Jessica insisted on coming with us. The lady we stayed with in another state, Robin, took no crap and called Jessica out on her strange behavior. Jessica proceeded to lock herself in a room and demanded Kate stay in there with her. They were in there all day, and eventually Kate came out and said to me that there's something wrong with Jessica and she's actually scared. Kate and I had plans to stay with another online friend, Matt, in another state, and Jessica demanded we cancel because she doesn't like or trust Matt. We said no, this is our holiday and we've paid for our flights, and Jessica then said she'll come with us, but we can't meet up with Matt. We said no, she cried, and we left. Kate blocked her on everything. Kate's mother called us not long after saying Jessica contacted her crying, saying Kate is in danger and that we abandoned Jessica, and she's so concerned for my friend's safety. It was actually incredibly scary. Kate later found out from another girl, Jane, they all knew each other from a forum, that Jessica had been telling everyone they were in love and had even slept together. I don't know how much of that is true, but I've known Kate for 20 years now, and she's never identified as anything other than straight. She denied it 100%. Jessica was just obsessed with her, and months later, Kate heard Jessica was telling everyone she was saving money to come to our country to find Kate. She never did, thankfully. Other than the time spent with this girl, we had a great holiday and made some good friends. I, 22-year-old female, had a 26-year-old male friend online for 11 years before we met. I'm Canadian and he's American. We met on a role-playing site when we were quite literally still kids and were a massive part of one another's lives, especially during our teenage years. We spoke every day through text, on the phone, had each other on social media. We even knew and sometimes spoke to each other's family and friends in real life. He called me his light and his sister, and I called him my brother. We were family. It would take a whole novel to explain our 11-year friendship and what we've been through together, but I'll just try to make it short by saying he had a very crappy and unstable life and had a lot of mental health problems. He was a narcissist. I spent many years being his emotional crutch and punching bag, helping him find jobs and being there for his breakdowns. I never broke off the friendship because after all those years, I kind of felt responsible for him. Anyway, last year we finally decided to meet. We were both grown adults and saved money to go on a 10-day trip to a dream destination of mine in the States. I knew this likely would not go well. I knew he was a narcissist, but I just had to meet him. I had to meet my brother, the guy that was there for over a decade. I needed to see him face to face. On this trip, he, 1, abandoned me on a mountain during a hike because he decided he wanted weed. When he came back, I was obviously mad and wanted to go back to our hotel, but he told me to wait for him in the car while he did the hike on his own. I took an Uber home and he returned as well 4 hours later. 2, automatically assumed I'd shell out $300 for him to buy a laptop he wanted without asking me, just brought me to the store to look around while we waited for our movie to start at the theater and sprung it on me. I refused. And 3, was overall inconsiderate. We only ate at places where he wanted to eat, when he wanted to eat, only did things he wanted to do and not me, despite the trip being my idea, and I missed out on a lot because he just wanted to sit around and do nothing. And so much more. What hurt the most is when I confronted him about it, he told me, "You're not my girlfriend. I don't need your approval or need to change for you to like me." I cut the friendship off and blocked him when we returned home. I also plan on retaking my dream trip one day and doing it properly this time. When I was 19, I jumped on a flight to meet a friend I had known for about 4 or 5 months. We both went through family bereavements and were a shoulder to cry on for each other, via the phone or internet, and we just decided to meet for a few days in a country between us. Until then, everything had been perfect. She was the coolest girl, really smart, the kind of person you want to be around all the time. When we met, things started great, but a day later she confessed, "You're not what I expected." What? 19 years old and not very confident, this knocked me sideways. "I don't know, you just seem different." I never hid who I was before we met and was completely open, and it put a real sour taste on the rest of my time with her. Instead of chatting nonstop and watching Jackass on TV in the hotel at night, we went quiet and straight to sleep, ate in silence. I put as much effort as I could into it, but I still never got to the bottom of how I was different. We went our separate ways, texted for a few days, and then never spoke again. Not quite an instant regret, but there were 2 people I was meeting, Macy and Maya, for the purpose of this story. We discussed meeting again, planned to have sleepovers, just generally have fun. The first day we meet up went really well. We all had a good time. I thought it went brilliantly. Then, a few weeks later, I found out they were carrying out all the plans, without me. They still have sleepovers to this day when Maya's back from uni, and I'm just left out. I don't speak to either of them anymore. It hurt. The worst part was, I'd met Macy a few times before and it was fine. This all happened after I met Maya at the same time. A few months down the line, Maya confessed she had a crush on me. Don't know if that played into it, but Never actually met him, but played Apex with a dude pretty regularly, almost every day. We finally exchanged info, and then he used to call me repeatedly in depressed fits and complain about how girls don't like him. It sucks because I wanted to help, but once it hit 36 calls in one day, I had to block. I actually worked with this lady at the time. She was good looking and very flirtatious. Most importantly, we both played World of Warcraft. She ended up inviting me to join her server, and of course me wanting to get closer to her, I joined. We played for a time and had a good PvP group going, her regular friends. Of course, she was still flirty with me in-game and I was back, all in group chat. Either way, we had some great times together slaying players in PvP. Summer comes and it's a company barbecue. I find out she's bringing one of our PvP partners to the event. Cool. It was her husband, a cop. I've been virtually flirting with her in-game in front of him for 3 months. In my case, he got freakishly obsessive and possessive. Met online through a fandom. After a few years, the fandom pretty much fell apart, but a handful of us stayed friends because we actually had a fair amount in common. D was very normal. The rest of the group seemed to love him. About 4 years after just being online mates, we met in person, and it went fine. We interacted a lot on social media. I had a really busy period in my life, but managed to squeeze in a Christmas get-together at my place for my little group of friends, including D. After that, my online activity decreased drastically due to being busy, and when I managed to get on Facebook, I noticed that most of the group were no longer friends with D. Weird, but whatever. I checked my messenger and saw message after message after message asking why I wasn't responding. What was I doing? Could we arrange a meetup? And things like that. I explained I was super busy and it was also coming up to the anniversary of my mom's death. So just give me some time and we'll see about meeting up another time. He said, "Oh, yeah, I forgot about the anniversary. You can have that day, but I expect a response after." Screw that. I blocked him. So he sent email after email after email asking me, "What is your problem? What do you think you're doing?" And things like that. So I blocked his email too. After 3 very peaceful weeks, there was a knock at my door. It was D, and he had a 6-page letter detailing why we had to be friends. I shut the door. I used an anonymous email thing to tell him if he contacted me again or showed up at my door, I would call the police. I went on Facebook and told everyone, including the 2 remaining mutual friends, about all of it, and could the mutuals not share anything about me and my life and actively discourage him from attempting to make contact? And the friends who had long since unfriended him started messaging me that they stopped talking to him because of how creepy he was being in PMs about me, always asking if they knew what I was doing. Had I talked to them? Was I seeing anyone? Or if I was actually busy, because he was convinced I wasn't, and things like that. In return, I told them how he'd been trying to convince me to stop being friends with them, because according to him, they were all sorts of horrible things, and that they were just incredibly jealous and hated how close he and I were. I assumed he was just butthurt because they stopped talking to him, so he was just making up a bunch of stuff about these people who had always been perfectly nice to me. One incredibly weird occurrence just before all this happened was telling me a mutual friend on Facebook that I was heading to the aquarium in London with my daughter, mutual friend also being in London that day with their daughter, and maybe we could grab a coffee and let the kids play in the park for a bit. I checked my messages later that evening and D was incredibly upset because he'd waited at Farringdon Station exit for 2 hours so he could come to the aquarium too, and I didn't show up. We didn't get off at that station, but one that was 2 stops after and closer to where we were going. I haven't heard a peep in over a year. He's apparently deleted his Facebook and Instagram and thankfully just disappeared. We met over a Dead by Daylight game. He was really charming, funny, and nice. Then he fell in love with one girl of our gaming group and they started a long-distance relationship. He even flew over to meet her in person. Turns out he's an abusive, narcissistic jerk who constantly belittled my friend. He gaslighted her and loved to play psycho games with our group. We stopped playing with him after a few weeks because he was so toxic to our group. Sadly, my friend struggled at that time and had difficulties breaking up with him. Took her several weeks to finally do it. She's so much better now. For my story, he wanted sex, I just wanted friendship. He had photos from when he was 16 as the only photos he shared. He was 24 and looked nothing like that now. So much so that I couldn't tell he was the same person as in the photos. I was barely 18 and inexperienced in the world. Money didn't impress me, but he kept trying anyway. Motorcycles terrify me, but he kept trying to up his bad boy image by telling me all about his. All in all, we were totally incompatible, but he kept trying. When I wouldn't bite, he decided I instantly hated him. That was more than 15 years ago. He's still using the same photos on meetup sites. I've called him out on it. He doesn't care. He says no one looks twice if he uses current photos. Truth is, it's his personality that sucks, not his face. I had a group of online friends for a bit, and I'm really close with my older brother, like best buds. And one day when we were playing League of Legends, I asked my brother to join after a while. I guess my brother was better at the game than me because they stopped inviting me to any games, so I was eventually separated from the group. One of them came to my state for an event and asked my brother if he wanted to go. He said yeah and then asked me. I was a bit hesitant, but after my brother insisted, I went. I did have fun, but there were moments that made me remember I'm not really in that group anymore. For mine, the lady was crazy. We met through an app that was advertised as a meet friends app, and not a dating app. Well, turns out it was a dating app. However, she put in her bio that she was married with 2 kids. I put that I was in a long-term relationship and looking for friends. By the way, I'm a guy, she wasn't. So when we arranged to meet up, her husband and 2 kids were there as well as my girlfriend. Everything was going great. Hung out a few times and added each other on Facebook. Turns out she was super into the whole breastfeeding in public thing. Like, I get it. You go, girl. But she was super obsessed with it. 4 out of every 5 pics she posted to Facebook was her boob in her kid's mouth. She got angry when you looked away in public. Like, she wanted you to stare at her while she breastfed. Just got to the point that I was super uncomfortable with it and moved on. I met her after gaming with her for about a year and a half. My parents allowed me to have her visit for a weekend. Unbelievably beautiful girl. Had a lot of deep talks on the phone, were frequently flirting quite hard and stuff. She kind of was my first love interest. We went out for a drink with a few friends of mine, and she started hitting on my best friend the second she saw him. Didn't even pay attention to me the whole evening. And the first thing she said the next morning was, "Let's go to his place." That really hurt.
Law enforcers, have you ever come across a crime so stupid or ridiculous that you just let it slip? Not the US, to clarify for everyone asking. This was in South Africa in the early 90s. When I was in high school, the rugby team found out I had learned how to drive but not yet received my license. They all knew I did not drink, so one of them had the genius idea of inviting me to parties as the designated driver. We'd lost a popular kid to a drunken accident a few months earlier, so it was actually a good idea. It was a great arrangement, lots of parties, lots of girls, and all I had to do was get them home in one piece afterwards. It went great for a few weeks, until one night. The police had heard there was a big party on a farm outside of town and decided to set up a roadblock. So I come driving up to flashing lights, car filled with 5 big drunk guys, including one passed out with his head out of the window, and little scrawny me barely able to look over the steering wheel, and the inside of the car smells like a brewery. The officer takes one look at the car and asks me to step out. "Have you been drinking?" No, officer, I don't drink." Has me take a breathalyzer. 0. Looks at me. "Can I see your driver's license?" Sorry, officer, I don't have one yet. I'm getting it next week." And I point back toward the car, "But they have theirs." He looked at me, flipped his little book closed, and said, "Just take them home. Next time I see you, you'd better have your license." Under the circumstances, this sounds like a pretty reasonable officer. Like, better the guy who's gonna get his license next week and sober be driving now than one of these guys be trying to. I overheard this one last night as I was sitting near 2 Indiana cops at Panda Express. So this lady had a warrant for an unpaid ticket and missed court date. I bring her in and it turns out that her address is wrong and she never got the court summons. The original ticket was for possession of a black bass under 14 inches, and since she admits the court summons, it was now on her record. So if she goes to apply for a job and they inevitably ask her, "Do you have any criminal history?" she's obligated to say yes. Now imagine if the employer asks, "Why?" "Because I caught a small fish." Maybe I'm dumb, but I am confused.
I was at a convenience store buying beer while 2 cops were milling around looking at soft drinks and snacks. One employee was working the register while another one was throwing out old donuts. One of the cops looked over at her and said,
"You can't do that in front of the police."
It was funny because he sounded upset with her when he said it.
Always nice when people have a good sense of humor.
My ex-fiancé was a cop for a redneck town where the people didn't have much money. He was called to the grocery store where a little girl about 9 was being detained in the manager's office for stealing a box of tampons. He said she had tears and snot everywhere and her pants had obvious bloodstains all over the front. My ex then bought the box she was trying to steal along with 3 more boxes, some food and milk. He then drove her home to a trailer that was falling apart. It wasn't so much the crime that was ridiculous, but more the manager's reaction. I guess when my ex came in, the manager was just screaming at this terrified 9-year-old.
That's a nice story, a fine story, a good story. But my question is, what did you do to drive away such a good man? A kid, of course, I don't know the ins and outs of their relationship. I frequently, or did when I was in uniform, let impaired care or control slide. If I found someone sleeping in the back seat of their parked car after drinking, it demonstrated to me a decision to not drink and drive. I'd often take keys or drive someone home, but arresting them just seemed wrong. Long as they're not obstructing traffic or in a really inconvenient place, I think that makes perfect sense. I was the lucky one once, not charged by a cop. In college, my friend had a massive house party. I woke up the next morning face down in a puddle of drool in the bed of my truck. Went inside and found out the cops had busted the party and everyone got underage tickets. Over 30 people, except for me. Not sure if they took pity on me or never saw me, but they had my truck boxed in with squad cars. The lines on my face from the rubs on my bedliner took 2 days to go away. Well, aren't you a lucky boy? Not a police officer, but I witnessed it happen. I got a phone call from a police officer using my buddy's phone. Apparently, my buddy, a jackass, got so drunk he fell out of his car in the drive-thru lane at Taco Cabana. The cop told me I had 15 minutes to get there and pick up my friend. I made it in time and the officer helped me throw my friend in the bed of my truck. He told me to take my friend home and when he woke up, tell him he was a goddamn idiot. The police officer was a homicide detective in the major city in which we lived, and he said he had real crimes to solve and to stop wasting his time.
You better take your drunk little jackass friend home. I got donuts to eat, coffee to drink, and murders to solve.
A long time ago in a life far removed from my own, I had a nasty dope addiction. I cleaned up my life and had been clean for 3 years. My friend had been learning to become a tattoo artist and asked me if I wanted one. To repay his kindness, I picked up a 30-pack and some tequila. After about 3 hours of him digging in with the gun and most of the beers and booze gone, we came up with the plan. We were going to go to the city and score some dope. Didn't take long and we accomplished just that. We found a nice, quiet, dimly lit parking lot to pull in and get to getting high. We break out the gear and started. He got his ready faster and got it done. I was out of practice and fumbled around a bit. Just then, someone knocked on the window. It's the cops. We rolled down the window and they asked if we knew where we were. Before we can say anything, the cop said, "This is the fucking police station parking lot. Are you frickin' thick?" They took the dope and sent us on our way, and I now have 13 years clean thanks to that cop. You know, in times like that, I can't help but think that well, if you're that stupid or just unaware of your environment, then yeah, you deserve to be arrested. But in this case, I guess things worked out. There was this guy where I used to live who would walk around smiling strangely and approach people trying to shake their hand. As soon as he got a hold of their hand, he would try to kiss them. A friend of mine naively accepted his handshake and literally bent over backward trying to avoid the kiss. A couple of churches in the area had this thing at the end of their service where everyone would shake hands so this guy would show up to reap the harvest. Cops were called on him a few times, but to my knowledge, they never arrested him, but just drove him far away from the area and dropped him off and made him walk all the way back. I'm just picturing that interaction as, "Oh, well, nice to make your acquaintance, old chap. What are you doing?" Brother-in-law is a cop. We'll call him Jack. He used to ride a bike in downtown Toronto during his first 2 years. Canadian cops ride in bikes and wear tight shorts during summer, by the way. So he was on a side street when he spotted a car driving like 10 kilometers an hour and every like 5 seconds stopping suddenly like someone hitting their brakes hard and starting again. So he follows the car going around in a 4-block circle wondering, what the hell? He decided to check if maybe something is wrong with the driver and needed help. He gets close to the car and he hears the driver, which was male, groaning. He immediately thought the driver was having a health issue. He rides up to the driver's window and puts his hand on the car and at the same time asking, "Sir, are you all right?" Driver slams his brakes and Jack sees a female lifting her head off his lap and hastily, the driver covering his crotch. He tried so hard not to burst out laughing. Driver was so embarrassed when Jack asked for license and registration. He said it was also obvious the woman wasn't a hooker because of her looks and the red face of shame. So the driver croaks up "Is there something wrong, officer?" officer while my brother Jack was looking at his license. Jack told the driver that he was driving too slow and he seemed to be in distress, and next time he would be better off trying not to have engaged in a sexual manner while behind the wheel. He said all that in a very stern voice while looking at the guy straight in the eyes. He didn't give him a ticket or arrest him. When he returned back to the police station, he relayed the whole story to his buddies. They call him Spoilsport Jack now. It might sound a bit juvenile to say, but I love earning nicknames in the workplace. My time to shine. Now, I was the lawbreaker in this case, but the cop was so utterly dumbfounded and amused that he just let us go. Let me tell you the story of the 12-person Prius. It was around 10 p.m. on a Friday night and was my first day in college. It was freshman orientation day during the summer, and we got to stay in a dorm for the night. While my group was getting to know each other, we decided that we should find something fun to do. However, being in a small town, our options were limited. Thus, we decided upon visiting the glorious Walmart in town, about the most fun place to go. Our plans were thwarted though when we discovered that we were all dropped off by our parents and didn't have a car. We sure as hell weren't going to walk 8 miles, and we didn't know what to do. But then, the twins piped up. The identical twin sisters apparently didn't come with their parents and instead borrowed their parents' Toyota Prius for the weekend. Great! So, with a car ready to go, we start for the parking lot, but then somebody did a head count and mentioned to the group that we have 12 people. Our hearts sank. How could we bring 12 people to Walmart with a Prius? One person suggested taking 2 trips. One person said, maybe we shouldn't go. But then, somebody suggested that we all squeeze in. It was brilliant. And after thinking about it, 100% feasible. So we got to work. 2 people in the passenger seat, 1 driving, 7 in the rear seat, and 2 in the trunk. It was a masterpiece. Thus, the journey began. Nearly touching the ground and easily bottoming out the suspension, we set forth for Walmart. We got about half a mile from campus before we were pulled over. The cop was speechless as he counted as each person exited the car. Sergeant Casper, his name was. Casper was the friendly cop. He could barely contain his laughter. He simply told us that he didn't want us getting hurt, that we should walk back to campus, and that he was impressed that we fit that many people in the car. We sat there and chatted for about 20 minutes and left, never to fit in the Prius again. Casper, the friendly cop, the friendliest cop you know. My wife got pulled over one night while I was riding in the passenger seat. She was driving my car and it didn't have automatic headlights and she forgot to flip the switch. The cop walks up and gets both our licenses, checks them and walks back. He issues my wife a warning, then gives me a ticket for presenting an expired license to an officer. He tells me it's the same as presenting a fictitious license to an LEO, and it's a $250 fine. I was confused because I had just renewed my license a year earlier, but before I could ask, he had ran back to his cruiser and drove off. Sure enough, he wrote down my license issue date as the expiration date. So I go to court to fight it, take a day off work, wait around at the courthouse for 3 hours. Finally, my case gets cancelled and I talk to an AITA. He says if my license is current now, then I'm off with just court costs. I explain the mistake the officer made, his eyes glaze over, and says, if we go to the judge, it's gonna be the full line. I explain again and he says fine, we will go to the judge. Another hour later, the judge calls the case and I explain it again. He asks to see the citation and the ticket. I present them. He looks at it and his face kind of squishes up in a what the hell look. His exact words were, who is the dumb butt cop wasting my time? Charges dismissed. For those who don't know, I say for those who don't know, the actual quote from the judge are words that I am not at liberty to say. I once got pulled over for speeding 15 over. I had just gotten Taco Bell, and when he asked me why I was going so fast, I said that I'm just really excited to eat my Taco Bell. He laughed, gave me my license back, and let me go, saying that was the funniest excuse he had heard all day. I think that's as valid a reason as any to let someone go on a speeding ticket. I was on foot patrol in central London about 2 in the morning. I turned a corner and saw a group of very drunk, ex-public, privately schooled for you colonials, schoolboys staggering along the road with a collection of the usual ubiquitous parking cones. They had about 10 cones between the 5 of them. I stood there for about 5 minutes, walking this lot sodding about, when one of them spotted me. He then made an attempt to warn his friends that he had spotted me, but they were so drunk they didn't take any notice. He then gathered as many cones off of his friends that he could carry, staggered up to me and said, Officer, I would like to hand these over to you as I think they are lost property. I burst out laughing and walked away. Typical, such a typical drunk juvenile act to do in England. I was young and went out to buy some condoms at a store. I spent a long time standing there trying to figure out what to get. Finally grab a box, then wander around the store working up the nerve to actually purchase it. I chicken out, put them on some random shelf, then go walk out of the store. As I get to the door, some lady in her 40s comes running up to me and in a slightly out-of-breath voice demands I hand over the condoms. I'm shocked and answer, wide-eyed, that I don't have them. She doesn't believe me, so I sheepishly lead her to where I ditched them. As I leave again, I realize just buying them would have been a lot less stressful. My advice for buying condoms is just slam the pack down and do not break eye contact no matter what. They'll respect you because you're practicing safe sex. I was hammered one day walking home with a bunch of my friends. I see a trash can and running dropkick it. Of course, it sends trash everywhere, and all I hear on a PA is, pick it up. Cop there the whole time, never got out of the car. I picked up the trash can and put all the trash back and went on my way. Cool cop. Give a hoot, don't pollute. When I was in high school, my buddy and I left during lunch to go get our biology cat that he'd left at home. A biology cat is one that's being dissected. It was all splayed out and opened up on a dissection tray, essentially a baking sheet filled with wax so you could stick pins in it. We took off in another friend's car, a Beetle with no muffler and flat tires, and screaming to Mac's house about a mile away in a little lower middle-class neighborhood. Got the cat, put it on the back seat, and threw a dish towel over it because, well, it's just creepy. As I'm backing out the driveway, Mac tells me to be cool. There's a cop down at the intersection. We putter down the street and stop at the stop sign, and suddenly we're surrounded. Plainclothes cops come up and block us behind. Two standard cop cars come from each side of the intersection and block us in front. A cop gets out and yells at us to turn off the car and step out. We're freaked because we know that the car has all kinds of illegal substances hidden away in the glove box behind the dash. Under the seat, we also have no idea why driving fast and loud in this neighborhood warranted such a massive response. We get out, hands on the hood. Officer starts to search the car. We tell him about the biology cat and point to the back seat. He lifts the dish towel up, looks at us, and stops searching the car. Everyone backs off and he tells us to get back to school, and if I wasn't busy right now, I'd haul you in for speeding in a residential neighborhood. Get your muffler fixed. After school, we found out that someone had been murdered in the neighborhood earlier that morning. 2 male suspects seen leaving the area. Our biology teacher laughed his butt off. Never so grateful for a murder in my life. I understand the relief, but I certainly wouldn't say it like that. Not a cop, but I was driving to North Carolina. It was supposed to be my brother and I driving, but he went out the night previous and got hammered, thinking I'd drive the first leg, then he'd finish it out. Well, he miscalculated how hungover he was and was useless the entire way. This was a 12-hour drive, but when we finally got there, my brother starts complaining at me. He needs to use the bathroom. We were in the city at this point during rush hour, so I was stuck in the left lane among a great deal of traffic. There was a left turn that could get me to a Wendy's, so I jumped into the lane. The green turn arrow became yellow, so I started slowing down. My parents and brother all scream some variation of, "Just frickin' go!" So I do it, and sure enough, I see the lights go on, pull into the Wendy's parking lot and turn off the car. A large woman gets out of a cop car. I swear she is straight from a buddy cop movie as the loud-mouthed comic relief, permed hair and all. She walks up and looks totally serious. My brother is in the backseat, hungover, pale and sweating. He leans forward and blurts out, "Can I please go inside while you do this? I'm about to poo my pants." Her serious tone just completely drops and she starts laughing her butt off. "Of course, honey, you can go." He jumps out and runs into the building doing the funniest butt clench I've ever seen. She ends up giving me a warning because she saw me hit the brakes, then heard everyone screaming at me. She warned everyone to not distract the driver and told me to ignore everyone else, which I know I should have done. So everything worked out well, and my brother ends up coming out with Frosties for the family because they wouldn't let him use the bathroom without buying anything. I would have just immediately forgiven them once they brought me the Frosty. If it's ice cream, a ice lolly, a slush puppy of some kind, if it's a frozen treat and you're trying to curry favor with me, well, you've got it, baby, you've got it. When I was in college, I woke up one morning to knocking on my door. I sleep naked, so just grabbed what was on my floor. It was a tank top and a frilly pink skirt. I opened the door to see a cop. At this point, I am experiencing the absolute worst hangover in the world and very possibly still partially drunk. He tells me that the landlord is paving the back parking lot and I need to move my car. I look at him and tell him there is no way I can drive it this time, and say if they need to move it, they might want to do it themselves. Meanwhile, he is clearly holding back some laughter. He agrees to move my car for me and bring back my keys. I told him to wait a minute while I get them. Still trying to contain his laughter, he says, "Ma'am, they were actually in your door. I'm completely mortified and feel like death now." He returns 5 to 10 minutes later and tells me he moved it to the other section of the lot. I go back to sleep and a few hours later leave to go to class. Well, the car is absolutely nowhere in sight. I find a cop car parked not too far away and tell him what happened. He called into the cop and it turns out the landlord had it towed. The first cop shows back up, apologizes, and offers to take me to the tow lot to get the car. On the way there, he decides to show off a little and is speeding through red lights and across town. It was pretty thrilling. The PD ended up paying for my towing fee. I mentioned the pink skirt because while we were on our way to the tow yard, he told me that he was holding back his laughter because the last thing he expected to see was a hungover girl wearing a tutu at 8 a.m. Apparently, that's what it looked like to him. And after seeing the keys in the door and what I had on, he envisioned the hangover type evening for me. This does not really fit the question of the post, but there are a lot of stories here of good guy cops helping out idiots in need, and thought it was in a way relevant. I mean, that's precisely why I've been enjoying these stories quite a lot. I once woke up at the back door of a Chicago home, inside their 8-foot fenced and secured yard. I was awoken by 8 cops yelling at me and shining their lights on me, telling me to exit the yard and come to them. There was no way to get out of the yard, and the homeowner had to come take a lock off the gate to let me out. I was asked where my shoes were, where I lived, how I got there, and what the hell was going on. I explained I went to bed on my friend's couch around 10. Inside my pockets, they found a giant glass pipe and an even bigger piece of devil's lettuce cola bud. After some serious what the hell looks and giggles from the greatest cops in the world, I found myself being given a ride 2 blocks away to my friend's house. I apologized for being a sleepwalking idiot and for the illegal substances, which I then realized was still in my pocket thanks to some pretty awesome Chicago cops. They do sound like some pretty understanding and cool cops. But for real, how the hell did you sleepwalk 2 blocks away? I mean, the most I've ever seen someone sleepwalk is like 5 feet and then pee on a television set.
When I was 18, I got pulled over. Policeman asks, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" I say, "Yes, because I did an illegal U-turn." He says, "No, because you ran a stop sign." He was so amused by my stupidity that he let me go.
Some of these policemen sound extremely easy to please. My friends and I were driving home one Saturday night and spotted a car that looked like it had veered off the main drag and up against a building. We approached the car and tried to see if the driver was okay, but he was unresponsive, so we called 911 and the police showed up. They roused him and started asking him questions such as, did he have ID? No. What was his name? He didn't know. What was his address? He wasn't sure. The more he talked, the dumber and more stoned he sounded. They asked him if he lived in Portland, the city where this was occurring. He replied, "Portland?" Like he had never heard of the place. They then asked if he was from Beaverton, Vancouver, Gresham, Oregon City, Hillsborough, etc. Each time he responded as if he never heard of any of the cities mentioned. The cops paused as if they had run out of questions to ask, so I thought I might be able to help. I asked the driver if he lived in Oregon. He stonily replied, "Where's that?" I informed him it was on the west coast of the USA between Washington and California. He asked, "USA? What's that?" I replied that it's the main country in North America. "North America?" he says with more confusion. "Yes," I tell him. "North America is one of the continents of planet Earth. Are you familiar with planet Earth?" At this point, both officers are giggling and no longer asking any questions, deferring to my interrogation. The driver looked up in the sky for a few seconds, then returned his glassy gaze to me. "Earth?" he asked. I replied that Earth is the 3rd planet in this planetary system around the star called Sol. "Where's that?" he wanted to know. I replied that Sol was located in the spiral arms of the Milky Way galaxy. Perhaps he was from somewhere in the Milky Way galaxy. That did not seem to ring a bell with him. I asked, "What about the Andromeda galaxy? Might you be from there?" He got a bit excited and indicated that the Andromeda galaxy sounded quite familiar. I turned to the officers and informed them, "He's from the Andromeda galaxy." They were laughing to the point where there were tears streaming from their eyes. I turned back to the driver and asked, "Are you here for the weekend or just passing through?" He hadn't decided yet. I was very interested in how he was able to get his VW bug from galaxy to galaxy, but he wasn't willing or able to share that technology with me. A shame. The police officers give him a ride back to the local detox center where I'm sure he was able to meet some fellow traveler and share good times. Whatever that boy was smoking, it pretty near gave him amnesia. That is crazy. Doesn't even know what galaxy he's from.
To those of you who earn a good salary in a low-stress job, what do you do? I'm a medical radiation technologist. I think my job is one of the least stressful. We don't work long hours like nurses and doctors, and our only main priority is to take diagnostic images of patients. But once we're done, they're taken away by porters, so we spend little time on patients. At the end of the day, when we finish our hours, we just head home and relax. I find it a relaxing job. Gets easier the better your skill set, and there's usually people to help you. This is strictly for x-rays only, not CT or MRI, of which is more stressful since you're on a schedule. I kind of like my job. I'm an operator at a nuke plant. I make up to $180K depending on how much overtime I work. If I don't work overtime, I make $140K and only work 32 to 48 hours a week. It's shift work, which can take a toll, but it's a union job and we're treated very well. It's low stress in a sense where if you can pass the monthly exams demonstrating your knowledge of nuclear plant operations, you shouldn't be concerned. But if you're not as book smart as the rest of the crew, you can have some problems passing the initial training you receive and the continuing. So, moral of the story, if you can pass the training, it's very low stress. I'm a truck driver, home every day. Just listen to music and watch the sunrise. Make about $80K. Could make much more if I put in the hours. The worst is having people complain about you existing. Just gotta have a screw 'em mentality. I wouldn't recommend truck driving to others though. It's very hard to get a good paying job. I got very lucky and had a home daily company hire me the moment I got my commercial driver's license. Long haul drivers actually make less than home daily drivers, which nobody seems to understand. Deckhand on a tugboat in New York for $385 a day. Next promotion to mate for $580 a day, and captain is $670 a day. We live in the boat and go up and down the East Coast for 2 weeks. Then we get 2 weeks off work. Most of the time we eat free food and watch satellite TV. I bring my Xbox and play a couple hours every day using my phone as a hotspot. Literally straight chilling for 2 weeks with friends. I guess my job is not low stress or high paying to most people, but it checks both boxes for me as a single 24-year-old male. I work rural EMS in Canada. My schedule is 96 hours on, followed by 96 hours off. In other words, I work 4 straight days and then get 4 days off. I live in a big city, but the town I work in is an hour and 40 minutes away. So my commute is not that terrible when you consider that I only need to make the drive once every 4 days. When I am actually at work, I can do whatever I want as long as we don't get a call. My company sets us up with a nice staff house, satellite TV, Wi-Fi, and a decent gym. I spend my days playing video games with my coworkers, there's 4 of us on a shift, watching TV or movies, cooking, eating, working out, taking a nap, and just hanging out with my coworkers. If we do get a call, we have 8 minutes to respond, so I can lounge around in pajamas all day if I want, and if I need to run an errand in town, I can usually get it done without getting more than 8 minutes away from the station. The calls can be kind of crappy, lots of highway accidents and farming accidents, but I find the really crappy ones are few and far between. Most of the calls are just driving people who don't feel well to the hospital, but I do enjoy the tough calls because they challenge me to make quick decisions and use my skills. In 96 hours, we usually average about 5 to 6 calls. However, I've literally worked 96 hours without a single call on more than one occasion. Regardless, I never take the work home with me. I make around $70,000 per year with good benefits, and there are a lot of opportunities to pick up extra shifts, which are paid at double time. In-house graphic designer for a pretty large retail company. We stay busy, but there isn't any of the stress that comes from working at an agency and having to please several different clients or worrying about getting enough work as a freelancer. I ultrasound hearts and vascular systems in a doctor's office for $35 an hour. Super laid back. If you're fast enough, half your time is free time. I manage to trade stocks, read, learn something new, and just generally keep extra time filled with something interesting. I teach English in China, 12 hours a week, roughly $2,700 US a month, and that's with almost all living expenses paid. 1 return flight a year, 3 months off a year, but I'm paid for 11 months. I know I'll never get rich, but I make way more than I could spend considering the cost of living here. I could easily save $2,000 US a month. I have plenty of time to pursue my hobbies, and even my time in the office is very relaxed as my classics are so basic. I work quality control on electrical and mechanical projects. It's simple. Read the original proposal and the 100% specifications, and don't let the subcontractors waver from them. Keep the customer happy by showing them you're all about giving them what they paid for. It has its moments where it can get pretty hectic, but 90% of the time, it's laid back and stress-free. I am noticing that quality assurance seems to be one of the main jobs on this post. I sit behind a desk and design do-it-yourself home theater and automation systems. People send in their floor plans and I put little speaker and TV images where they should install stuff. And I troubleshoot the systems over the phone too. Easiest money I've ever made. And I get paid pretty good. I'm a personal assistant for a really high-end real estate agent. First few months was stressful, constantly trying to work out how he operates. But now that I've worked it out, I get everything done in advance for him and spend most of my day just chatting with others in the office, drinking coffee, and going on Reddit. I despise working. I've always hated it. I thought I would grow out of it, but at 27, I just seem to dislike it even more. So to find a job I can be excellent at with minimum effort and stress that pays me well is a dream. I also start early and don't take lunch, so I'm home in good time to my doggo. I'm a college professor. If you find a field you love, you get to talk about your favorite thing for 15 hours a week, earn the income of a full-time job, and get several months off a year. Air quotes because you use that time for grading and prepping stuff for the next semester. And of course, you work longer than 15 hours a week. But what that work consists of varies widely. If community college, it's pretty chill, mostly meetings and waiting for students to see you. Research positions vary in responsibilities. Specialized schools could be chill or more demanding, but there's potential for the majority of your time outside the classroom to be up to you and how you spend it. I'm a senior accountant for an oil and gas company. It's kind of a small family-operated company. The president of the company takes very good care of the employees and their families in terms of compensation, bonuses, and benefits. Unlike other larger oil and gas companies that have been hit hard in recent years, this one is still very much in the black. Make no mistake, the actual work is very busy and fast-paced. My career has advanced pretty fast here, going from knowing nothing about oil and gas industry to being one of the 3 most senior accountants here in just a few short years. Always something new to learn and skills to advance. Really, it's not just the career role itself that makes it low stress, but the place you work as well. The respect the company and people here have for each other is a rare find. Everyone loves their job, and the company is always pushing and making good on the ideal that employees are their biggest asset. Both people above and below me are highly talented, respectful, and very easy to work with. I have to work a weekend every once in a while from home just to be sure my duties are done to the best of my ability. However, for the most part, I go in at 8 a.m. and leave at 5 p.m. and my job ends there. Very flexible, can work from home or leave early, and the trust that everyone's busting their butt is a big part of that. It's my dream job. After years of crappy ones inside and outside the field after graduating college, I got really lucky. A friend of mine makes $45,000 a year in marketing. His entire job is making a newspaper/TV/internet ad saying, "Who would like to try a new product?" Sitting on his butt for several days waiting. Then when people respond, he sorts them by if they should qualify or not. Guys can't test women's deodorant and things like that. That's the end of his job. Everything else is done by another group. He has hours of paid free time he uses to code and do side projects. He went to school for 8 years for math to get this job. I work data analytics. Today, I make $75K plus salary, good benefits, working Monday to Friday, 7 to 3:30, and all from home. Haven't worked a weekend or night or more than 40 hours in years. No commute, no traffic, no office drama, no dress code. No degree, no special training. Just an eye for patterns and fascination with data. Started my career 13 years ago doing outbound telemarketing for a credit card company. Nights and weekends for around $9 an hour. Basically the first job I could find with health insurance. About once a year, I looked for something that was a little bit of a stretch and moved for a raise. Mastered the job and move again. Going to school now for a degree only because my work will pay for it. I work as a landman in the oil and gas industry. While that title is sort of all-inclusive and covers a ton of different jobs, I spend most of my time researching the history of property to see who's owned it for the past 150 years and what they've done with it. Things like are there any mortgages, oil and gas leases, easements, etc. Oil and gas companies want this information so they can determine who to lease/pay when they drill for oil. All of this information is available in county courthouses, so I spend about half my time there reading old documents. The rest of the time, I'm able to work from home. It's a very chill job. I don't really have a boss, no one bothers me when I'm working, and courthouses can be almost like libraries sometimes. It's also a very rewarding job because you're sort of figuring out a puzzle and get to see something through to completion before moving on to your next project. There are sometimes deadlines and priorities, but they're never too bad for me, and I always hit them. It can also get stressful when there's no work or you have to move around, but I still think it's worth it. Generally, most people have a degree, but not always. It's very much an industry that still relies heavily on networking, and I know several people who do what I do and make great money without a degree. I've made over $100K a year for about 5 years now, and I've only been doing it for 7. I'm a petroleum geologist, 6-figure salary right out of school for a 40-hour-a-week job. It still involves some stress because of how much money rides on my educated guesses, but for the most part, us geologists love what we do and don't stress a whole lot. Just so you know, low stress doesn't always equate to low effort. Anyway, my official job title is senior producer, but it should probably be wearer of many hats. In a given day, I write, shoot, edit, and produce between 7 and 12 unique videos, along with all the associated assets, splash screens, and tie-in media. Said videos are then published to a handful of sites, after which I prepare and disseminate just over a dozen newsletters. Once that part's finished, I do back-end maintenance on a few of the pages in question, followed by some light community management. If I'm lucky, I'll get 15 minutes to rush out, grab lunch, and make my way back to the studio, after which I'll devote myself to editing the stories that our writers put together. That's followed by a focus on whatever one-off projects might be in the pipeline, which usually includes a fair amount of asset creation or adjustment, and a final look at the documentation associated with any of the above endeavors, which I'll update as necessary. When I finally leave at the end of the day, I'm exhausted. It's a lot of work, but I'm happy with the fact that I have creative control, and I'm pleased to be making something with an immediately visible end result. And most of all, I'm not bored. For me at least, there's nothing more stressful than boredom. I'm a carman. I inspect and repair freight cars. Most of the time, work is laid back and easy. Sometimes I have to work in crappy conditions like a heat wave or torrential rain or freezing temperatures. Sometimes I have to lift heavy stuff or do sustained hard labor, but those days are rare. Stress only comes when the yard is all messed up and the yardmaster wants us to magically unmess it, or when managers come snooping around to try and get you in trouble. Again, rare days. The job suits me and pays me enough to be comfortable. My schedule sucks, but they're hiring, so I'll finally have some seniority. I work for one of the world's largest board game companies. Most of my job is granting studios in other countries access to our files so they can translate them and sell them in their country's retailers and then pay us a royalty. I get to go on trips to check out their studios to make sure they're up to the job, go to a lot of game conventions, and literally am required to play games with the coworkers I love at least a couple times a week. The benefits are great, and being only 2 years out of college, the work experience and salary are good. I got my master's, and luckily enough, a friend of a friend just then needed someone who could do data analysis. So I moved to a small city in a poor state where most men graduate high school with little literacy or numeracy and end up going to work on farms or doing manual labor. I spend on average about 4 hours a day doing pretty basic calculations in Excel and get paid twice the average income for this town. It has its pros and cons. I meet tons of interesting people I wouldn't have otherwise come across, and I have a very different perspective now on what I used to consider success. But it's also lonely, and I have a hard time relating my life to those people I meet. I work midnights as a direct support professional for people with developmental disabilities. 90% of the time I'm on Reddit or drawing or watching movies. Most of the time the guys in the group home are sleeping. It doesn't pay anything amazing, but $10.25 plus benefits isn't all bad when all I have is a GED and a few hours of training. Some people couldn't do it. Too nervous around people who are definitely not neurotypical. One of the guys right now a few feet away is just rapidly rocking in a recliner as he watches TV and occasionally making noises, which I just realized would freak a lot of people out. My full job title is Export Compliance Executive at a medical device company. Sounds fancy, but in reality, a distributor asks for a document which has already been compiled by someone else. I just copy and paste. It's fantastic. I'm a program coordinator for desk operations at a large university. Essentially, I manage all of the desks in the dorms on campus. This entails lots of student employees whom I relate quite well with at my ripe old age of 22. The job is mainly email chains and meetings with an occasional difficult conversation. I get university benefits and just under $40K. To be fair, my cost of living is dirt cheap. I'm a dog walker in Los Angeles. I see the same 10 dogs every day, every week. So it's like I have 10 dogs of my own. Since my clients are dogs, they're always happy to see me, which I will never take for granted after years and years in retail. I get to be outside in the sunshine, listen to lots of podcasts, and I'm walking all day. I'm no Rockefeller, but I work part-time and it pays the bills and gives me a little extra money to play with. So I'm very grateful. I don't know if it's a good salary, but I take home about $30 an hour in tips dealing poker. My paychecks are usually $200 to $300 every other week, after benefits and taxes are paid for. You can take home over $5K a month just pitching cards to people and putting up with their whining. The job has completely worn me down after 12 years, but there's zero stress involved with it. Mine is way different than most of the other comments on here, but I make upwards of $120 a day just delivering pizza for Domino's in an incredibly affluent area of North Texas. Basically, getting paid to drive around and smoke. It's amazing. I'm an independent contract courier. My job is to drive to a list of animal hospitals, pick up blood samples, urine, stool, biopsies, etc., and then transport them to a medical laboratory for testing. I make $240 a day, just driving around in my car. I'm a medical transcriptionist. I think the pay is very good considering how stress-free and easy the job is, once you learn the lingo properly. I work in 3 shifts too, so the pay is even better. I'm self-employed, but I guess it still counts. I help small to mid-sized companies grow their business online, both strategically and operatively. The requirement is that they've already had a decent revenue stream and profit. Then, my recipe is very simple. Revamp their website, build content like blog posts and landing pages to get more organic traffic, plus buying ads, if the data shows it's profitable. The demand is so high that I've set up 4 rules. 1, there shall be no demand that I'm physically present. 2, clients shall not tell me how many hours I need to work. They should be happy for the hours I allocate for them. 3, there shall be no deadlines. 4, I only take projects that I find fun. I can work from wherever I want, whenever I want, as long as I have some electricity and an internet connection. My clients are happy because I bring in good results that cover what they pay me. Some of my clients have internal statements saying we put our employees' well-being before business. So I never have to feel bad if I take a day off to do something I like. They rather encourage me to do it. I could easily work 300%, but I choose to work half-time. At this point, I should hire more people, and I probably will, but I enjoy my freedom a bit too much still. I recently got my job and I'm really lucky. I work for a university in admin and get about $60K a year and 17 super to respond to emails and the occasional phone call from students who need help. Sometimes it can be tricky issues, but a lot of the time I basically tell them stuff that can be found on our website, like their study dates. Or I explain how to submit forms and send their forms off to be processed. I love my job. I work in digital media marketing. I make okay money, around $80K, and work from home. Some days I'll have about 1 to 2 hours worth of work to do, but probably 2 to 3 days a week I do almost nothing. Sometimes I feel bad for how little I work compared to the credit I get, but a large part of my job is reactionary. So I figure as long as I'm there when I'm needed, then I'm earning my wage. I've also been doing this for 6 years, so I can do it with my eyes closed. I get no joy from it, but it's so easy and I work from home. So, meh. I work in swimming pool repair. I get paid by the job, not by the hour. So if I want to mess around all day, I do. If I want to make a buttload of money, I bust my butt all day. I get to make my own hours, I quote my own prices, and I knock off early for a matinee or for a beer with friends whenever I want. I average about $75K a year. I work in software quality assurance. Pays about the same as developers, unless you're on top tiers or specialized, but way less stressful. Also, the hardcore programming autistics don't enter this field since it's not actual coding, so competition for good jobs is less. Most just run or write tests and tell nerds they're doing things wrong. I'm a teacher for students who don't give a crap because their parents are rich. It's often frustrating that they don't want to learn, but then again, pretty easygoing because you can reuse old teaching plans without feeling guilty. Parents, students, and administration only get upset when I'm fed up and expect at least some of them to do their work. Currently, my contract rolls in desktop support. I'm not sure if I'm just lucky or great at my job, but nothing breaks and I only really spend 10 minutes a day total fixing things. This email won't send, that's because the email address is incorrect, that sort of stuff. I'm more here for a just-in-case scenario. It's okay, but I miss my previous roles on a service desk being hit with calls for 8 hours a day. I get in, blink, and it's time to go home because it's so full on. The days go pretty slow here and I end up exhausting Reddit by lunchtime. But for $35 an hour at 21 years old, I can't complain. I'm a garbage man. I switch between a two-man truck and the scale house at the transfer section. I make $50K a year to dump your trash and tell you where to dump your trash. It's a town job. We're one of maybe 6 towns in Connecticut that hasn't privatized trash collection. Redditors who work in retail, what's the saddest thing someone ever returned? Customers come in regularly with large amounts of baby supply returns. They get the wrong gender items or duplicates. An older woman came in with a cartload, so I asked about the new baby. She slowly and through tears explained that her only child and grandbaby had died during childbirth. A man returned a Christmas tree one year. He was pretty bummed out, and when I asked him about it, he told me that he was supposed to have visitation this Christmas, but his ex refused to let him see his kids. I still think about that guy. I hope he gets his kids this year. I used to be a manager for the Disney store. We had a regular old man come in with his wife regularly. Super cute couple. I mean, matching outfits, holding hands, just as cute as could be. We used to sell these huge stuffed animals, like ginormous. The couple came in about once a week and would just walk around, laugh, and smile. Buy little things here and there. One night, he came in on his own and bought one of these gigantic Mickeys we had. It was $300, I think. He was so excited about it. He told us all about how he was going to take her out to dinner and it would be sitting there on the bed to surprise her when they got home. Anyway, 2 days later, he walked back in carrying the giant Mickey Mouse plush to return it. He had bought it to be a surprise for her 75th birthday. She had passed away in her sleep the day before her birthday. He thanked us and said goodbye and that he would not be coming back because our store reminded him too much of his wife. We found out he passed away a week later. We found out all the details because one of our employees went to their same church. 2 middle-aged ladies, apparently sisters, were having the time of their life in my department. One bought a ton of assorted housewares, including some relatively inexpensive but very distinctive-looking glass vases. We chatted throughout, and they were fun. I kept thinking about how much of a real joy it had been to deal with them. The next week, she came back to return the vases. When I asked the reason for the return, suspecting, the color/size didn't work like I expected, she embarrassedly explained that impulsive purchases were a problem in her manic states. Not a return, but I worked in a jewelry store and the saddest sale we ever had was a lay-by. Guy had this ring on lay-by for 12 months, but died in a car accident. His parents came in and picked up the ring so his girlfriend could keep it. Don't think she had any idea he was going to propose. I worked at Toys R Us in the late 90s, before there was really a separate baby store, and we sold all the cribs and clothing and such. Someone returned carts full of baby items from a registry. An older man came in on behalf of the mother because the baby was stillborn. We accepted all items at full price with no receipts and gave cash back. The family certainly didn't need hundreds of dollars in store credit. I work at a liquor store in a college town, and one night some younger guy was returning a keg barrel, only it was still half full. I jokingly asked the guy if it was a crappy party or something along those lines, and he responded with, "Yeah, it was a party for one of our friends who died the day of the party." I work at a hardware store. About a week ago, we had someone return a jack, which I think had failed and snapped shut on his arm. His forearm was completely shattered, and I think he lost his job. I work at a thrift store, and it's not exactly returning, but we get a lot of sad donations. For example, we had a recording of a father's final moments he made for his 2 sons. It's like 2 hours long. I listened to the whole thing. Also, there's a guy who comes in every week and donates 1 box of stuff. I asked him if he was moving one time, and he said, "No, these were my wife's, and she's passed now." I'm never asking someone why they're donating again. I was working at a large pet store, in the tropical fish department. One busy weekend, a very well-dressed, rather snobby woman came in and bought 6 baby angelfish, each about the size of a dime. plus the fins. The store I worked in was inside a huge high-end shopping mall, so we had a holding service where we would bag up fish, cash the customer out, and float the fish in their bags in a warm tank until the customer had finished all their shopping and was ready to leave for home. As a matter of course, I offered to hold this lady's baby angelfish. She said she was all good and laughed. We thought nothing of it, since many of our customers come in from outside the mall just to stop at the pet store, and didn't bother visiting the rest of the mall. 4 or 5 hours later, she stormed back into the store demanding a manager and a refund. She was shaking the bag in our faces for emphasis, yelling that her gorgeous angels were all dead. On close inspection, we discovered that the silly woman had put the poor fish in her car, presumably so she didn't need to carry them while she stopped for other things or returned to the store to pick them up. Unfortunately, because it was January and the temperature outside was about minus 15 degrees Celsius, the tiny babies had frozen to death. She simply couldn't wrap her head around the idea that tropical fish cannot withstand freezing temperatures. Even when we took a tiny fish out of the bag and showed her that not only had ice formed on top of the once 84-degree Fahrenheit water, but the dime-sized fish was actually frozen stiff. Some people just shouldn't have pets. Not strictly retail or a return, but at the cinema I used to work for, someone booked an entire gold class lounge so they could propose to their girlfriend alone. This cost thousands of dollars. He had a special video made up to play after the trailers, the whole 9 yards. A day or two before the big day, he called to cancel his booking. His girlfriend had dumped him. I work in a clothing store, and a gentleman came in with his wife because he had lost 80 pounds and needed new clothes because his old ones wouldn't fit, obviously. I congratulated and jested that he must be working out every day to lose that kind of weight. He replied that cancer was the cause of the weight loss and not exercise as I so jointly suggested. He understood when I apologized and still bought clothes. Jared Allen bought like 15 families Christmas at the Target I worked for. I mean, like big ticket stuff for everyone, like TV, iPad, things like that. It was something like $15,000 total. The next day, since I was the security manager, I was screamed at by 8 of those families that wanted to do returns for cash, saying I was ruining their children's Christmas. I made it to my lunch break before I comped out. This kid came in by himself and was looking for some socks or booties for his weenie dog. He was telling me about how he got her and how now her legs didn't work anymore, so he didn't want her getting hurt while dragging. He paid with a bunch of pocket change and ran out the door. A couple days later, he came back in and just handed me the socks back. I worked at a Subway for a year, and we shared the building with a jewelry store. It was a small business, and we always made a salad for the owners free of charge. One day, a customer at their store is incredibly enthusiastic about buying an engagement ring for their significant other. He told the entire Subway crew about how he met her after his mother died and that they've been seeing each other for almost 5 years. He kept saying how happy he was that he found someone who makes him truly happy, and that all the challenges in his life were necessary for him to find true love. He came back a few days later. The light from his eyes was gone. He was returning the ring. I talked to the owners later that day after he left, and apparently she broke it off with him because she fell in love with someone else. It was really sad to watch. I worked at a grocery store where someone returned a box of crackers. She said that she doesn't actually eat the crackers. She just licks the flavoring off them. This particular box didn't have enough seasoning for her, so she had licked the crackers and then brought them back. I went behind the return counter one day and saw a pair of boots with a damage slip in it. They looked fine, so I asked my coworker why she damaged them out of the system, and she said a girl died in them. Apparently, the girl's mother bought them for her when she was sick in the hospital. She died and the mother returned them. Someone returned a prescription dog food. I knew what had happened as soon as she approached the counter. Her dog passed away. He was very old and sick. She broke down in front of me. I used to work for an online retailer that sold baby items. Think baby memory books, clothing, toys, growth charts, things like that. Someone was returning a baby memory box where you can store items like their baby shoes and teeth for posterity. When I asked what was the reason for the return, she said it was because they had lost the baby. You could tell in her voice how hard that was to say. I was fresh out of college, childless, and had no idea how to react. Fortunately, that was the only time I ran into that during my time there. A set of Mr. and Mrs. pillows. She had a tan line where her engagement ring was, a black eye, and her neck in a brace. It turns out the fiancé was abusive, but he didn't show his true colors until about a month before the wedding when he thought he had her trapped. Luckily, she got out. I felt really bad for her. Not so much a return, but an old man came into the photo lab I worked at to pick up his photos. He had dropped them off months ago and he had no ticket. Turns out his house burned down and he lost everything. We helped him find the photos. All he had were photos of a gray cat sleeping or sitting by a window. He cried like a baby when he saw the photos. He was old and living alone. The only thing he cared about was that cat, and it had died in the fire. I forgot to charge him for the photos. My bad. I helped a woman 7 months pregnant and her husband pick out a whole baby set for their new baby. Stroller, crib, car seats, clothes, and everything. The stroller was a high-end model that we didn't sell many of, so it stood out to me. A month later, I saw the same stroller, car seat, and crib in the return bin. When I asked about it, my manager said that the woman and her husband were hit by a drunk driver and killed. Her mother returned the items. This happened a little over a year ago. A frail old woman came in to return an unopened box of a very expensive brand of cologne. She didn't say much past, "I need to return this." And me, being the people person I am, trying to jokingly mention, did her husband not like the brand? She sighed and said, "It was his birthday present, and when I went to visit him in the hospice to give it to him, he had already passed away." I was speechless and profusely apologized and ended up talking to her about my mom passing away a few months prior to this. And we ended up crying together in the store and talking for an hour and a half. She left with a smile on her face, but the initial reaction still haunts my dreams. Not my story, but my supervisor shared a story with me about an old woman who placed a large order to redecorate her and her husband's house. We're a store that mostly sells general home items, but also have a large selection of furniture. She had selected several $1,000s worth of merchandise. A lot of it was special order, so it was being sold non-returnable. The woman ended up passing away shortly after everything was delivered, and the husband couldn't deal with all the new stuff. He wanted to keep all of their old things exactly the way they were, so my supervisor made an exception to have it all returned and refunded. Somewhat similarly, someone created a registry for their upcoming baby. They had a ton of baby stuff picked out. Unfortunately, the husband had later called in to say his wife had miscarried and the baby didn't make it. The wife was okay, but in no condition to talk on the phone. So again, my supervisor allowed everything to be returned. No questions asked. I worked at a vitamin store. The most commonly bought items were weight loss or control pills that had ephedra in them. Xenadrine and the store brand equivalent were the most popular of those, next to hydroxycut. Our store sent memos that due to recent problems with the products, we would be honoring full refunds even if the product was opened and mostly used. The people returning them were tweaked to their follicles, shaking, sputtering, saying, I can't take this stuff anymore. It's making my heart pound too fast. And I'm just like, okay, it's okay. I should add that not only was it the most popular product bought, but most commonly returned one. The return box in the back was brimmed to the top with open bottles of Xenadrine. A woman came up to the return desk with 3 shopping carts and a fistful of long receipts. She explained that she was a compulsive shopper, and that as part of her therapy, she was supposed to return everything to face how much she had been spending. It took me over an hour to ring up the hundreds of items she had, all new in box, all with receipts. When all of it was done, the bill came up to nearly $800, and a lot of the things had been bought long enough ago that they had clearances out, so her return was pennies on the dollar. Back when I had just started college, I worked at Barnes & Noble. One night, I was working a shift at the cash register, and a lady came up with a handful of books and a stuffed llama. I told her the llama was really cute, and she was like, "I know, isn't it great?" She checked out and walked out to her car, where her husband and son were waiting. 5 minutes later, she came back inside. She said she had to return the llama, and I expressed surprise and asked why. She said, "My husband wants my son to have a more American animal, like a lion." I worked in a plus-size clothing store. I helped a woman pick out a wardrobe for a 2-week cruise that she was going on with her boyfriend of 6 months. A few weeks later, she returned all the clothes unworn. I asked her if the cruise was canceled. No, it turns out that there never was a cruise, or a relationship. This guy was dating her as a prank, and he and his buddies schemed to see what they could get the girl to believe. She thought he was in love with her and wanted to move in together soon. His parting words to her were, "Like anyone would really date a fat person like you." A woman came into the pet store I worked night shifts at and bought a ton of stuff for her new rat, and about 2 days later, she returned everything, including the rat. She put him in a soda box turned on the short end. He was coated in feces and urine. I took him in the back and cleaned him up, but God, I don't know if I've ever felt so bad for an animal that I really have never taken an interest to. I worked at a clothing store that was popular with teens. A spoiled tween came to the register accompanied by her mom and laid out easily $500 worth of clothing, probably around 20 plus tops, 5 pairs of jeans, a jacket, shorts, sandals, and more. As I'm ringing up this absurd amount of items, another girl, I assume the first girl's friend, joins the tween and her mom. As she approaches, I realize the friend must have recently underwent chemo. She was probably a tween as well, completely bald and frail. She approaches the girl and her mom with a single tank top. Friend, is it okay if I get this? Mom, sure, but Susan needs to put back one of her items. Daughter, no way, Mom. Profanity-laden verbal assault on her mother ensues. Mom decides to purchase $500 of clothes for the daughter, while the cancer-stricken friend returns the $10 tank top. I continue despondently ringing everything up, hating the world. I used to manage the warehouse at an electronics store, and occasionally sold stuff and did returns and whatnot. A younger guy came in, about 19 or 20, and said he just got his first real job and wanted to buy a big screen TV to celebrate his first paycheck. Sold him a good TV, did the normal testing for him, slight discount on warranty and whatnot, cause I'm cool like that. He was super happy. I packed everything up for him and helped him get it out to his hatchback, probably his parents' vehicle. A week later, I saw the TV in my warehouse with a return tag on it. I asked around a bit, but nobody really knew until our usual customer service girl came in to start our shift. What I was told was that after I sold the TV, he was on his way home when a deer jumped out in front of the car, went through the windshield, and killed him instantly. The TV was undamaged because he'd laid it down on the floor in the back all wrapped up in bubble wrap in the box. His dad had come in to return it. I work in customer relations for a luxury car dealership. I basically get paid to interact with customers and make them feel more at ease during the buying and servicing of their vehicle. That being said, I get to know and like a lot of our customers. So one day last year around Halloween, we had a young family come in looking for an SUV, since the wife was pregnant and the husband had just gotten a huge promotion. They had a kid already that was around 4 if I remember correctly, and were actually just really cool people. I actually spent a lot of time getting to know them through their buying process and was excited to have this family get their dream car. Fast forward to this August and I see their SUV out in the parking lot. When you work at a dealership, you learn your favorite plates and cars. Or I'm a freak, both are possible. I ask around and no one in service is working with them. So I ask our sales manager, thinking they're switching into the redesigned model of the SUV. We'd talked about it when they'd originally bought their car. He gave me an uneasy look and said it was the wife's mom, and I should talk to the sales guy. Weird, but okay. I find the sales guy and he's also uneasy, but after a few minutes tells me to go to the back office and he'll fill me in. Apparently, the husband had some kind of massive breakdown and had taken it out on himself and his wife. She had just had the baby and I suppose that had stressed him out. Her mom was called when the toddler went to a neighbor and said his parents were messy and still sleeping. Basically, the mom was there to see if we could buy the vehicle back after getting everything else taken care of, which we did. For my story, I'm on the other side of the coin here. Last fall, my dad decided to finally get his hearing checked and assessed for hearing aids. He really needed them. He wanted to be able to hear his first grandbaby, my daughter, coo and babble when she was born in January. Unfortunately, the ones that worked the best for him were outside the budget he and my mom could afford. My husband and I decided Santa would gift them to him. He cried. His new ears gave him a new lease on life. He was happy, chatty, and interactive during family get-togethers because he could actually hear everyone else enough to participate. Fast forward to January and he's the happiest, most doting of grandpas. He was the first person to hold her after my husband. Dad started feeling sick in February. He died on April 12, 2016. The baby was just 10 weeks old. My mom has been largely unable to handle things in the wake of his death. Among all of the other things that I've handled for my family, because it's just too hard on everyone else, Mom asked if I would do something with his ears. I ended up calling the hearing aid shop and asking if they knew of any donation program where someone could benefit from the use of his ears. We actually ended up donating them to an elderly woman who was having difficulty communicating with her family and couldn't afford new ears of her own. Dad would have liked that. I'd like to think that she can hear her grandbabies giggle and laugh now. I've declined the opportunity to meet her. I don't think my heart could take it. For my story, they didn't actually return anything, but we offered to return something. I work at a pet store and we do dog training. This guy got a pit bull and signed him up for one of our training packages that includes adult level 1, adult level 2, and a good citizen test. He finished adult 1 and everything was great. He registered for his level 2 class and when the day came, didn't show up. This was out of character for him, but the trainer gave him the benefit of the doubt, and since he was the only dog in the class, didn't think much of it. Turns out the 21-year-old kid had lost lost his life earlier that morning while his dog was around. We found out from an online news thing. Girlfriend figured something was weird when he didn't meet up with her after his training class time was over. Even though it was past the return time and he bought the package, we offered to return the unused class to the family. The girlfriend didn't want to because the owner would have wanted the dog to be trained, especially being a pit bull. One time, I helped a woman pick out some items for her elderly sick dog who had incontinence problems. He had been sick for a while, but she seemed optimistic. That morning, before she took him to the vet, he was doing much better than he had for the last few weeks. He was energetic and mobile. While I was checking her out at the register, she got a call from the vet. I stood there and watched her face crumble as the doctor told her that he had had a seizure on the exam table, and that there was nothing they could do for him. All I could do was step out of my register box and hold her while she sobbed. I'm not sure when this happened, but I want to say around 2007-2008. I worked at Hollywood Video, Blockbuster competition, as a regular hourly employee. One evening, a woman came in with a few children's movies about 3 months late. Instead of dropping the movies in the DVD drive-thru box or the walk-up return box, she came directly into the store. Visibly shaken and on the verge of tears, she apologizes for the movies being late and explains that her son had just died and that she'd forgotten to return them. My coworker and I were so floored that we offered her several free rentals, a popcorn/candy/soda pack, and a few additional credits on her account. It was definitely one of those rare times that I didn't feel like my time was a total waste at an entry-level post-high school job. A friend of mine currently works at a pretty high-end clothing store. About a couple weeks ago, he helped this girl pick out a new dress for her grandma's upcoming birthday party. A couple of weeks later, she came back and exchanged the dress for a black one so she could wear it to the same grandma's upcoming funeral. I work in a pet store. We rarely get dead animal returns besides fish, but it does happen. My flaw is I get attached to some of the animals in my care, mostly if they don't sell right away and are very handleable. I'm fine when they eventually get sold. Better than living in a pet store anyways. But the worst experience was when I sold a guinea pig who was extremely sociable and loving to a nice-looking family. A few days later, they come in and I recognize them, and they're holding a small box in their hands. Their son had thrown it against the wall in a temper tantrum. Knowing I had a hand in the death of one of my favorites by selling him wrecked me for a week. Pawn shop owners, what was the best reaction you've seen from someone that tried to sell you something that was completely worthless? Having worked at a pawn shop before, I can say there are plenty of amazing stories of customers and their antics. Usually the best stories revolve around jewelry. This one woman came in with a big gold-colored ring and wanted to get a few $100s for it. Picking it up and looking at it, I could tell it was super fake, and I tried to explain that to her. She wouldn't buy it because the street vendor told me it was solid 14 karat. I went and picked up our huge earth magnet and put it near the ring, and it shot right to it. I explained that solid gold is not magnetic. She was stunned and couldn't believe that she had spent like $200 for it. I own a similar store. People still think their Beanie Babies have value. People also tend to think what items sell for online are what they'll sell for at the same price and speed locally. I worked in a pawn shop for a couple of years. The most memorable one was about 30 seconds. Large, sweaty man walks in with a belt sander, sets it down on the counter in front of me and plugs it right in. Made direct eye contact and switched it on. The sander immediately made a loud popping sound and smoke began to rise. Unplugged it, turned around and walked out without a single word between us. For a second, I thought he was just gonna walk in and sand the countertop. I worked in a small pawn shop for about 3 years, and my personal favorite was a greasy guy came in and dumped out a garbage bag of broken computer fans and a few assorted computer parts. We laughed for a few minutes and realized this guy was serious. My boss asked him how much he wanted for it all, and the guy said he didn't know how much it would be worth, but he heard there was gold in computer parts. We had to break it to the guy that the plastic computer fans had no gold in them, but we can check out the other parts. My boss gave him $5 for his trouble. 20 plus years of owning one, and I can spot fake gold without touching it. People never believe the chain they bought from the guy at the gas station for $50 isn't real. Never. Seeing people's reaction to this varies from they knew it to I'm gonna kill him. Not an owner, but I am a frequent shopper. I saw a meathead couple try and sell their off-brand wires-cut 20-inch car stereo speakers for $200. When the guy wouldn't bite, they flipped out, yelling, "You legally have to buy anything." They threw such a tantrum he called the cops. They got arrested. Car got searched, and wouldn't you know it, substances were found. Afterward, I got a good deal on some cordless power tools. I worked in one for a few years. Not really a best reaction, but a girl came in already in tears holding an engagement ring. Everyone at the pawn shop feels obliged to tell you why they're selling/pawning, and she told me she'd recently moved across the country and just found out that her fiance had married her friend back home. The big problem was I could tell it was fake as she was walking in the door. All I could tell her was, if you thought he was a jerk before you came in here, you're not gonna like what I'm about to tell you. Ended up giving her $5 for a worthless ring just to give her something. And she ended up a bit happier, cause now she had something new to hate him for and couldn't wait to tell him. My great uncle owns a pawn shop, and some of the crap there is hilarious or heartbreaking. People try to sell free old TVs they got on Craigslist for hundreds of dollars because now they're vintage, obviously rented instruments for their kids' band class that have tags on them from the rental place. And boy, do people get peeved about engagement rings. He literally has a bag of engagement rings. They're so easy to come by. Women tend to be sad when they find out they get almost nothing or that they're fake. Men tend to get aggressive. Enough that he is my cousin up front, watch out extra careful when he tells a dude he can't really pay much of anything for what the dude thought was an investment ring. And some of the excuses people make when stuff is obviously stolen are just horrible, especially if he asks if they can prove they're the owner of the item. On the other hand, if someone's trying to sell their wedding ring, especially if it's a lady with kids, he's been known to just give them $50 and send them on their way. My cousin who works with him has a stack of brochures for drug and alcohol treatment resources and stuff like that she gives out regularly. I have one here that's the opposite. Girls thought they had worthless cards that ended up being very worthwhile. I worked in a comic book shop that also sold trading cards. In this case, Magic the Gathering. Two young girls came in, maybe 14 and 15 years old, with a small box of cards. They said they found it in their uncle's closet that passed. They figured it wasn't worth much, but just wanted to see. I thought the same, and opened up the box of cards to take a quick glance, and I was a little alarmed at what I saw. Alpha and Beta cards, a couple of Power 9 cards, and this was just the first 10 cards in. I stopped, said, "I'm really sorry, but I'm not familiar with these older cards." I lied. I just wasn't authorized to try and buy something of this magnitude. I'll need to call the store owner. I called him, and at first he was annoyed because the other store he was visiting had a Ford plow through the front window. He just said not to bother with the trade-in, until I casually mentioned some of the cards there in the stack. He said, "Don't let those cards leave the building, I'm on my way," and hung up. The girls couldn't wait, and I asked if they wouldn't mind leaving the cards with me, along with their names and phone numbers, and we could get back to them. When the owner came in, he went to the back, got some gloves, and went through all the cards. I stayed after my shift because I wanted to see it unfold. The owner gained like 10,000 respect points from me when the girls and an older woman, presumably someone's mother, came back in, and he was straight with them. He said, "What you have here is all very worthwhile. There isn't a card in this box that would sell for less than about $5. But these cards here," he fanned out some cards that I couldn't see, "are the most valuable cards in the box. And this one," he pulled a card away, "would sell for the price of these and the entire box at least twice as much. I don't have enough money to be able to make you a fair offer. What you have here is easily worth about $20,000 to a collector." The girls' mouths dropped open. The owner offered them everything he had available in the shop, about $6,000, and they accepted. Not a pawn shop, but I used to work in a mobile electronics store. Alarms, cruise controls, stereos, things like that. Had a guy come in with a box full of outdated high-end stereo equipment. Head unit, EQ, preamp, 3 amplifiers, and some nice crossovers. I told him that most of it was worthless to me, but offered him $40 cash or $65 store credit. He flipped out and began a rant about how all his stuff cost over $2,000 when he bought it. Yeah, 16 years ago. I calmly explained explained that he may be able to get more for it on eBay or something, but I have to make a profit, so I can't offer much. I also explained I wouldn't have offered anything if I wasn't personally interested in the crossovers. He slammed everything back into the box and stomped out while calling us every name in the book. As he was walking out of the door, he looked back over his shoulder, yelled something, and flipped us off. This is where he messed up. Since he wasn't looking where he was stepping, he tripped over the curb and spilled the entire box of gear into a huge puddle. A very deep pothole full of rain. It was hard not to stick my head out of the door and bellow aloud, "Ha!" I was a pawnbroker for a while. So many junkies trying to sell fake jewelry. But this one lady really stood out. She came in with a chain and pendant in a cute little box. First thing we do is look for marking. While I was doing that, she started getting feisty, yelling at me saying, "Why are you doing that? Don't you see it says made in Italy? Hey, stop! Are you blind?" At this point, I'm like, "Okay, lady, we can't take this. It's not real gold." And she just flips out saying, "It doesn't matter, it's from Italy and this and that." She called me stupid and flipped off all the staff. All we did was laugh. But as she revved off, she hit a BMW and the owner saw her. We turned over the security taping to the cops. Screw that lady. I worked in a buy, sell, and trade video game store. Day after day, people would come in with common Atari stuff, PS2 Rock Band guitars and drum sets, throwaway original Xbox or PlayStation 1 games, Superman 64, yada yada yada. They'd be so happy and excited, and I had to be the one to break it to them that they weren't going to get hundreds of dollars for their crap. "But I spent $60 on it when it was new. We've taken really good care of it. We've never even used it. It's for the N64. Isn't that vintage? What do you mean a third-party Xbox controller isn't worth the trade-in price for a Microsoft brand one? They're the same thing." Day in and day out, I had a woman who threw a complete fit that we wouldn't take her Wii Rock Band drum set and 2 guitars. She also had 25 DVDs, an original Xbox and a Wii, neither of which could read discs, and about 30 bottom shelf games. All of the discs were scratched to oblivion, and everything reeked of cigarette smoke and was yellow. When I told her that the only things we could take were the 2 controllers that came with the Xbox, she yelled, threw the box of DVDs on the floor, and proceeded to rearrange games on our shelves as she stormed out. The man she was with just picked everything up and they left. They tried going to our second location, but we called them and let them know what happened. They got the same deal there and she threw the same fit. That's the problem with running a local video game store. Most people think they have a secret gold mine when they just have run-of-the-mill crap. I buy and repair typewriters. It's an odd niche hobby of mine more than anything. Typewriters can go for a lot of money, but most aren't honestly worth what people want. 85% of typewriters are worth no more than $125 in pristine condition. A lot of people will try to sell their inherited typewriters for $50 to $1,000 more than they're worth in some cases. I've seen one person try to sell a typewriter to me for $650 because he saw one online for $700 in a different color. I had bought the exact same typewriter 3 days before for $63. One typewriter, several people were all trying to sell them for $150 to $250. I bought one in amazing condition, better than the higher priced ones for $70. Just because someone labels a price or because it's old doesn't mean it's worth that price or value. That's not how it works. I had this old fellow try to sell me a tribal wooden African figure in a grass skirt. You know the type. When I told him it was worthless, he tried to convince me that the skirt was made out of real lion's mane. When I inevitably shot him down and called his bluff, he pulled a Bic lighter out of his pocket. "Do you want to buy this instead then?" I used to work at a pawn shop. One time, a guy came in with a DVD VCR combo, brand new in the box. We, the pawn shop employees, would always engage the customer in conversation while looking at the item, partly to feel out the customer and see if they had any inconsistencies in their story that may indicate stolen goods. So I started the conversation. "Wow, this is a nice unit. Where'd you get it?" "Best Buy. Just bought it a couple days ago." "Oh, nice. But you want to sell it to us? Why not just return it to Best Buy?" "Oh, yeah. I can't find the receipt, but I bought it right down the street at the Best Buy, like 2 blocks from here." While we talk, I'm pulling the unit out of the box and checking the cables and remote, looking on the bottom for a serial number. As I flip the bottom of the unit towards me, I see that it has a giant sticker on it that says, "Property of Rent-A-Center, do not buy or sell." I didn't say a word to him. My boss was watching over my shoulder. As soon as my boss saw the sticker, he pulled out a Polaroid camera, snapped the guy's picture, cussed him out, and practically threw the DVD VCR at the guy. I sent a fax to the other pawn shops in town to give them a heads up. I currently work at a pawn shop. People think silver is worth a lot more than it is. I get people thinking they'll get $400 for a chain that's maybe worth $30. Other than that, collectibles and memorabilia disappoints most people. I worked at Sam Ash for a long while. You can sell instruments there, not exactly a pawn shop, but the same concept. Guy walks in with two very nice, obviously handmade boutique basses. One is left-handed, one is right-handed. Obviously, a red flag that a novice wouldn't even think about. Hey, I want to sell my basses. Okay, any particular reason? I don't play them anymore. I see. Just couldn't decide if you were left or right-handed? He wants $700 for both. Looking at them, I figured they were $3 to $4K each. Problem was, they didn't have a name, just a logo. Lots of Googling later and we have a brand. Call the builder up and his warehouse was robbed weeks before. Police are called, guy's arrested, and builder gets his bases back. Not a pawn shop owner, but used to work at an art gallery that sold some local stuff. A guy brought in some rare prints by a local artist a couple towns over. These limited editions were super rare and valuable. He kept insisting. I stayed as polite as possible until I finally had to show him the exact same prints in the clearance bin at about 1/10 the price he was asking for. Not a pawn shop owner, but I went to buy a few tools from one. I was in line and in front of me was a tweaker that was having a meltdown after finding out her grandmother's ring wasn't really that valuable. It was gold plated and had a small fake diamond. The pawn shop owner offered her $5. She stood there trying to haggle for $7. He stood firm on his $5 and she continued to flip out. I told her I'd give her $10 just to get the heck out of my way. She grabbed her ring and told me to screw off and stormed out. Me and the shop owner had a good laugh, and he knocked off $5 for my inconvenience. Former private security and my partner used to work security for a pawn shop. A Nahavo man once arrived at his place with a trailer full of landscaping equipment. It looked exactly like what you see residential landscaping companies use. Full of shovels, mowers, blowers, enough equipment for a 3 to 5 person crew. He wanted to sell everything at once, trailer included. The owner said, "Let's inventory everything. Give me 24 hours to add this up and I'll call you." The owner takes a notebook and writes everything down. Every item and what serial numbers he could get. Writes down the plates on the trailer and took a quick picture of a miscellaneous sticker on the hitch. He calls the police. The trailer was reported stolen that day. Him and a detective picked a time that was convenient. Owner calls the guy back and says, "I'll give you $4K for everything." And they argue over the phone and he gives up and says he'll pay $7K for all the equipment. Just come Tuesday at this time. The guy shows up and one detective and 2 officers arrested him. The arrest was calm and without incident of any kind. The guy knew the jig was up. The actual value of the equipment? Like under 1K tops. It was heavily used, very old lawn equipment. I'm sure it worked great for whoever it was, but it was all super old equipment with little value. I worked in a pawn shop for 3 years in North Carolina. I had a couple of stoned/drunk guys come in on a Saturday just as I was trying to close. One staggered up to the counter and pulled a box out of a plastic grocery bag. "You're not gonna believe this, man. I have a collector's item worth $1,000. He was correct, at least about the first part. He proceeded to sit a Galadriel doll from the Lord of the Rings movie on the counter. As usual, I pull up eBay to find many for sale in the $10 to $20 range. I turned the screen to show him and he flew into a rage. He jerked out his flip phone and dialed someone and proceeded to spit/scream into the phone. "Where did you see this doll for $1,000? Then turns and spits and screams at me, "Go to Google! Go to Google!" I wasn't even mad. Okay, well, I guess it's time for my most embarrassing moment. I got scammed by one of those stereo vans that goes around with equipment saying they had extra, but really it's fake. I went to the bar and my hat got stolen. I really liked that hat, so I went to the store to buy another one. As I was walking in, this van pulls up and these 2 dudes are like, "Hey, wanna buy a stereo?" I'm like, "Nah, I'm cool." They were really persistent. It also just so happened that I had an extra $100 in my pocket. They kept pushing. Originally trying to sell it for like $400. They said it was their last stereo and I told them I only had 100. Honestly, I bought it because I not only wanted them to get out of my face, but I also thought it was a cool deal. Fast forward to me getting home and never opening the product. I swear to God, it sat in my living room for like 6 months. Finally, one day, I needed a little extra cash, and I'm like, why don't I just sell the speakers? I drive around to 4 different pawn shops who all tell me they couldn't take it. No explanation why. Finally, I have this Hispanic lady who barely speaks English at a pawn shop offer me $40. I kept haggling on the price, so finally she got her manager. When the manager came over, he Googled the product and turns out it's a known fake product that's sold all around. The guy thought I was trying to get one over on him. I explained myself and left before the cops got called. I was a little worried. It didn't hit me until later that night why I was getting such weird facial expressions from the other pawn shops I went to. I still cringe at that story. Worked at a GameStop near a Target. Target employee calls me and tells me a list of games that were just stolen from the store. Lo and behold, not 2 minutes later, a couple walks in to sell us the games. The funny part, they were still shrink wrapped with the Target price tag and the locked plastic outer device. I noticed a police car drive to the front of the Target, so I sent my coworker over to grab the cop and I expertly kept the attention of the 2 idiots. Engaged them in a bunch of small talk, and as the cop was about to walk in, I said, "Looks like someone's here to see you." Their faces were priceless. I worked at a shop for 12 years. One of the most common scenarios is when a relative ignorantly thinks or flat out lies about something they hand down. Guns are one of the most common. My grandpa took this off a Nazi in World War II. The rifle in question being a 1950s Mosin with Century Arms import marks from the 1980s. Tons of antique silverware from the 1800s that was made in the 1960s that is nickel silver, worth nothing at all. And countless medieval swords that were made in China that they want $500 for, that you can buy in a catalog for $29.99. Not an owner, but used to work in one owned by my dad's cousin. Some lady walked in and we examined her jewelry, which we determined was fake gold. So she walked away mad, and I guess she threw it in the trash can by the exit. Later that same day, we see a man walk in that seems to be just looking around. And after a few minutes, he goes to the counter and shares a story about how his grandmother passed away and left him some jewelry which was passed down through many generations. But the times were tough, so he wanted to pawn the jewelry temporarily until he'd be able to get some more money. So we tell him, sure, we can take a look at it, when he pulls out the exact same jewelry the lady had earlier that day. But not to anger him, we test it with a magnet just to show him that it isn't real gold. He then gets very angry, saying that it is real gold and that it's a 50-carat rare gold from the 1700s, and that's why it's magnetic. For anyone who knows about gold, 1. Real gold isn't magnetic. 2. The purest form of gold is 24 karat. We explain that to him and he gets mad and pulls out a knife and starts trying to break our bulletproof glass with a cheap looking knife. And as a result, breaks it. After that, he just walks out and we never saw him again. While closing up, we checked the trash can and the jewelry the lady threw out was nowhere to be found. GameStop employees of Reddit, what are some of your horror stories? 4 come to mind. A woman comes in to trade in an old Xbox 360 in a box. I open the box and the smell hits me. Rat droppings, grime, cockroaches and all have spent time in this thing. Luckily, my manager noticed and we were able to decline the trade. Spent 5 minutes disinfecting the counter before I helped the next customer. Another time I was trading in a PS4, I think. We were chatting while I was wiping his hard drive and commenting on all his achievements. Sometime during his conversation, he got nostalgic and changed his mind. But not before I had already deleted all his data. I felt terrible. Another time, a homeless looking guy comes in during one of the few times I'm alone in the store. He was dragging around a trash bag and I was doing my best to keep him in eyesight as he was all kinds of sketchy. He managed to stuff an Xbox 360 in the bag and walk out, but I ran out and asked him to give it back, which he did, saying, "Please don't call the cops." Now, this last one kind of shook me. This woman comes in with a gaggle of kids, maybe 4. They were all terrors, running around to different parts of the store, yelling, grabbing things and rearranging them, seemingly causing distractions while this woman tried on 3 separate occasions to get behind the counter. They end up buying something, but then I notice under this big box the oldest kid has picked up, he'd stuffed his hands full of the little DS games that were on the go back section of the counter. There was more here, but I've lost some of the details. But it really gave me the impression that this was all coordinated by their mother. It's one thing to see adults steal. To see kids who are encouraged to do so, just terribly, terribly sad. I was an assistant manager when one of the Madden games came out, 04 I believe. We were doing a big midnight opening for it and everybody was having a great time waiting for the game, which we were picking up from the other store about 30 miles away. Around 11 o'clock, after people had been waiting for 2 hours after the mall closed, I got a phone call. The game wasn't coming. I almost broke down, sitting behind the register, dreading the thought of telling everyone that they'd just wasted their time. To make matters worse, another store within walking distance of us got their games. I just wanted to die that night. I'm so grateful that our customers took it well and didn't get too angry. I had a couple come in to return a Sesame Street video game and controller. They had a receipt from over a year ago. The game was scratched to hell and the controller was full of dried soda. They said it didn't work anymore, shocker, and were furious when I wouldn't give them their money back. Like, standing there screaming at me. I was the manager, so I had no one else there to back me up. It was kinda crazy. Their kid was bawling, the lady was swearing like a syphilitic sailor, and the husband couldn't finish a sentence. Pretty sure they were both super high too, so that was fun. When the PS2 came out, I was assistant manager, and my manager would sell them out of the back room at a markup. Such a snake. I took the demo Xbox home with a copy of Halo before the system launched one night and had a 4-player all-night party. One of our other local stores had someone dig through the outside wall and steal everything out of their back room. One time, a woman screamed at me because her kid was tearing open a toy before paying for it, and I kindly told him to wait a little bit. She seemed on the fence whether she wanted to buy the toy or not for her kid. So, I wasn't glad that her kid was already ripping it open. She then proceeded to scream at me for being really awful with kids, a horrible person, bad at your job, and things like that. Also, she wanted to complain to the manager if I ever talked to her kid like that again. She then angrily paid and walked out of the store. Also, people tinkering or modding their console and then trying to return it to us because it doesn't work anymore, and then angrily insisting on having bought it that way at GameStop. I worked part-time at a GameStop when I was in college. The best story I love to tell is the mom and son story. 40s-ish mom and 7 to 10-ish boy come into the store. It's a large strip mall with lots of stores. Don't even look at the merchandise, just come up to the counter and ask to let the kid use the bathroom, clarifying that she's not there to buy anything, but has spent thousands of dollars in our store previously. We politely tell her we can't let customers use our bathroom because it's in the back of the store with lots of high-priced merchandise. That's the policy. We have cameras and corporate reviews the footage. Another story I have where I was wrongfully terminated substantiates that one. Additionally, what we don't tell her is that all the used game consoles that people sell back to us were stored in the bathroom. There was 1 month prior to Christmas, I had to do some impressive yoga to get to the toilet. I'm sure those consoles were a hazard, but I digress. But not to be unsympathetic to this kid's plight, we tell the mom that the pizza place next door lets people use their bathroom if they buy something, and the cheapest thing is $1 soda or bottle of water. She starts flipping out on us and spewing expletives, telling us she's paid our salaries 10 times over and that we're going to hell, yada yada yada. Then, no joke, tells her son to just go. Kid actually unzips and pees all over the carpet in front of my register. Then they left. I've never been so grossed out and dumbfounded. Had to close up for the day and half the next day while GameStop paid to have our carpet sanitized. Resulted in a loss of pay for the weekend. Wonder what happened to that kid. He's gotta be in his 20s by now. Former employee here. 2 wonderful stories. Number 1, older lady brings in a bag. She looks like an addict and wants to sell her Wii. I put my hand in the bag and it's soaking wet. Cat piss. She was furious I wouldn't take it. From that day forward, I made every customer take all trades out of the bags themselves. Number 2, my first store was long, and I had a kid and mom in the back. Mom wasn't paying attention at all. 8-year-old walking around. Gets really quiet. Then mom rushes the kid out of the store. Go back there and he took a poop on the floor. Watch the tape. Mom finds him squatting, lets him finish, then takes him out. A gentleman comes in to buy one of our old 360 bundles. It was used and it was the old system that required the hard drive. He brings it back a few days later and complains that it doesn't work. We start our normal troubleshooting methods in store. We couldn't figure anything out, so I do a swap. Take his old system in as defective, then sell him a replacement bundle. I go through to try and wipe the system so we can ship it back to the warehouse. Cockroaches start crawling out of the system instead. I freak out. Throw the system in one of our giant shopping bags, throw that in a box, tape it shut, and throw that in another box. My manager tells me to just shrink it out, meaning we take the loss and destroy it in the back. I take it out to the parking lot and we have to throw it around to destroy it. These cockroaches freaking scatter like marbles on a floor. I'm dancing around the parking lot on my tiptoes to avoid the flood. It was awful. Second stories, one of my regulars was a skunk farmer. I'll say no more. I worked at GameStop a long time ago, but I'll never forget this one. One night, a guy brought in a really dusty and dirty GameCube, wanting cash, of course. I asked him if it worked, and he said he didn't know because he hadn't played it in a long time. I told him that we have to check every console, and when I turned it on and opened the lip, about 100 roaches came running out all over the counter. I worked in a store where theft was a very common occurrence. But this one dude, he nabbed one of the cheap controllers off the wall from the back of the store and puts it in his backpack. Then comes over to the counter, he reaches across the counter, opens a drawer, and steals a brand new game out of the drawer. Takes it away from the register, opens it, waits in line, trades the game in for 25 bucks. Then he asks me to look for something in one of the bottom drawers. And he steals the game back he just traded in a second time. After that, he immediately left the store before I could notice he was gone. I gotta give him credit. He was pretty slick. So many other sketchy things too, but this one I just had to laugh at. I've got two stories. Quick one is a guy who would come in all the time to ask about / buy obscure Vita dating sims and ask inappropriate questions. Like if the next Dragon Age was going to finally have sex scenes in it. Next one is New Year's Day. Miserable I'm working already. It's super early and first customer of the day. Of the whole year is like this 7-foot tall guy who comes in asking for AV cables for a PS4. Cause the one he just bought didn't have one. We immediately tell him the PS4 only uses HDMI, so it wouldn't have AV cables. Even confirming with him, you mean those red, yellow, and white cables, right? He starts getting mad and asks again for the cables, which we again tell him don't exist. Maybe there's an adapter or something, but I've never seen one, and we don't have them here regardless. Maybe check Best Buy. The guy immediately starts screaming, calling us racist and insisting we get him his cable, saying he's homeless and just bought the thing for his grandkids, calling us devils. Thankfully, I froze in fear and confusion and my boss took over and just scooted the guy out the door. Heck of a way to start the year. I used to be the assistant store manager of a GameStop, but nothing really out of the ordinary happened there. Just a lot of lingerers. When I was the manager of a local game store though, there was definitely a lot of wild stories. The one that sticks out the most was this old dude we called Psycho Sexy. He would come in every Monday morning and try to sell me or whoever was working bootleg adult DVDs. He would then tell us a little bit too much detail about how he would use them and that he'd sell them to us for super cheap. Every Monday he'd come in, open up his duffel bag full of adult DVDs, get refused, then leave, and come back the following Monday. This went on for almost 3 years. I was hired to help open a new store, a store where the manager was male, and everyone he hired, female. He was definitely trying to cultivate a hot GameStop kind of situation. Word got around, and we had people coming in to visit ours when they had other stores much closer to where they lived. They didn't really buy anything. They kind of just lurked around for hours at a time, chatting up the staff. There were days when they'd wait for us to close up, and that was kind of scary. I was eventually let go for not being friendly enough, which apparently was about 3 months before the manager had a total screaming meltdown during store hours, declaring himself High Archangel, threw some stuff at a customer, and was later picked up by an ambulance. So I guess my horror story is the whole damn job. My first job was at GameStop, early 2000s. I stayed for about 4 years from when I was 17 to 21. Started as a part-timer and ended up as a shift supervisor. Then boyfriend, later husband, now ex-husband was our store manager for a while. The point is, I've seen some stuff. Let's talk about my favorite one though. It was a weekday afternoon, so we're slow and short-staffed. It's just the two of us, my boyfriend and I, and maybe a customer or two. Someone's playing the Guitar Hero demo, someone browsing the wall. The door jingles and in walks a guy with a huge backpack. I give the customary greeting, "Hey, welcome, let us know if you need anything," and he doesn't acknowledge or respond. I shrug to my boyfriend and go back to cleaning discs or stripping cases or whatever. The guy looks around for a few minutes and we think nothing of it. Finally, he comes up to my boyfriend and gestures for the stack of post-its he's using to label games we're putting in the disc buffing machine. Boyfriend obliges. Guy says nothing, just writes on the post-it. He puts it on the counter in full view of both of us, and in all capital letters is the following message: "I have a gun. Give money?" My boyfriend and I turn sheet white and realize we're being robbed and this guy has a gun in his giant backpack. We're teenagers with no manager and no silent alarm under the desk, and we're terrified. The guy's already putting down the backpack and unzipping it. The other customers are totally unaware and off doing their own thing. And we're going to get murdered in a GameStop at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday over the $100 we have in our tiny till and the safe neither of us has the combo for. He reaches in the backpack and withdraws a light gun for a Sega Dreamcast. Turns out this guy's deaf and wants to sell us a light gun. I once had a lady and her teenage son come in to trade in several DVDs and games they had just stolen from the Walmart behind the strip mall where our store was. Walmart employee calls me to ask if they're in my store and says the cops are on the way. So stall or do whatever you can to keep them there. I said, sure. I told them the cash versus store credit value of their items without mentioning that I can't even take them because they're still wrapped in the cellophane. I walk them around the store and talk about which games are the best value for the money and things like that. The cops show up and ask them to step outside, and I just smile and go back behind the counter. They followed the police out and one officer comes back a minute later to get the merchandise. Last I heard about it. Not a horror story, but definitely weird. Then there was this wealthy couple who had 3 kids, and each kid had a Wii, a PS3, and an Xbox 360. They would pre-order every major game that came out for each system, always the deluxe edition. They spent a ton of money in our store, and they were crazy. So abusive to every employee. They cussed at us and called us stupid. They would ask for things they knew they couldn't have and then throw a fit. They would scour their receipts for anything that could be a mistake and make you explain it to them over and over. Eventually, I went to work for a different company, and they came into my store there and got in line for my favorite cashier. I immediately called a manager over when it was their turn to check out, explained how I knew them, and that there was a 99% chance that they would make the cashier cry. He went over, and just as he got there, they were beginning to raise their voices about some supposed mistake. Luckily, that manager's super good at handling people and got them out without letting them get a word in edgewise. I practically had PTSD from dealing with them. I think they got off on abusing people together. They would sometimes be laughing as they did it. If they found a legitimate mistake in anything, their faces would just light up. Truly evil people. This story's from 2007 or so. GameStop had a used game return policy. 7 days, no questions asked, full refund. People would abuse this constantly, like a rental service. We knew it, and we were able to flag people who did it too often and decline them the returns. Manager policy, not company policy. Then there was this one lady. Old lady, gaggle of grandkids. Seemed so sweet. Was very nice to us while in the store. Asking for help, recommendations, all of that stuff. Bought them a PS2 and a freaking gigantic stack of games. Like, had to be 20 to 25 at least. Her total came out to over $400. I rang her out, handed her the multiple bags of stuff, and said to the kids something along the lines of, "Wow, you guys are lucky to have such a great grandma. This many games will last you months." The grandma chuckled and said, "Oh, they're only in town for the week. You guys have that 7-day return policy. I'll see you in 6 days. Years ago, 2007 or 2008-ish, I trained a kid that turned around and robbed the store at gunpoint a month after we fired him for stealing. He and his buddies left without shooting anyone. My coworker was on the phone with the cops after he left while I was getting his old employee file out. I read off his 2 addresses he had down, parents and grandparents, phone number, and things like that. He's still serving time as the gun they used was apparently used in another homicide. Literally, this happened today. A customer brings in probably the grossest PlayStation 4 I've ever seen. I think, oh no, please don't have roaches. I hold it on end and tap it against the floor, and nothing falls out. Nor is there any rustling or things moving. No telltale signs. I take it in. My coworker decides he needs to find out why it's so dirty before cleaning it and opens it up. Inside is the world's first deluxe roach hotel. Managed to keep the horde contained in the box the console was going in. That console is gone now. Why are people so gross? I got scolded by management for helping a woman for 30 minutes. She bought 12 games and was looking for good recommendations for her son who was on the spectrum. I found every game on her list and a few more to surprise him. She was overjoyed that her son was going to have lots of good games to play. Why were they mad over such a large sale? Oh, because they weren't used. Screw that store. That woman wanted to make sure her son was happy and I was tasked to do so. I know I did a good job and you guys can close shop. Never was an employee, but on the night Grand Theft Auto 4 came out, I was waiting in line and this kid rode up in the parking lot and started bragging about how he got the first copy and held his copy out the window. About 10 to 15 seconds of bragging and holding it outside the window, another kid ran up from behind the car, yanked the copy out of his hand, and ran into the woods behind the GameStop. They didn't find the kid who took it, and the kid in the car started crying immediately. Not a horror story, but it makes me laugh when I think about it. I worked at a big box store similar to Best Buy when the Wii U first came out. After months of Wii U being impossible to find, we finally had some in stock. I was helping another customer on a busy day when a guy stopped me to ask the price on the Wii U. How much is the Wii U console? It's $400 Canadian plus tax. Yeah, that's too much money. Can you do any better on the price? Yeah, for sure. I can give it to you for $399.99. That's much better. I'll take two. I was an assistant store manager for about a year, had done retail before. Our store was right in between a fairly upscale touristy part of town as well as some of the poorer neighborhoods, so we got all sorts of people. The holiday season was in full swing, and we were always crowded. This particular day we had a few seasonal hires in to help with the workload, and I was behind the counter pulling games as people came up, just to help the transactions move faster. Then, suddenly, a smell hit the entire building like 100 cats had peed in the air conditioner, and someone had tried to get it dry by stoking a fire with burning hair. My seasonals look at me with a mix of confusion and terror as a family of 4 approached the counter, and it slowly became apparent that they were the cause of the smell. I've been noseblind before from staying with an aunt who used to be an animal hoarder, but this was far worse. I sent my seasonals on break, grabbed the hand sanitizer, pumped a small mountain of it into my hands, and as casually as possible smeared it on my upper lip, hoping my facial hair would hold onto it and block the smell. It mostly worked. I was already in holiday rush mode, but this was the fastest I ever got a used Xbox 360 and GTA 5 packaged and ready to go. When they left, we noticed that the store had actually cleared out of all the other customers, who also couldn't deal with the odor. My store manager came out of the back, gave me props for not embarrassing them, and promptly proceeded to fill our store with Febreze. What overlooked fact from a movie will completely change the way I see it? In Return of the Jedi, it's implied that the Ewoks feast on human flesh when they were going to cook the gang on spits. At the end of the movie, there's certainly more than enough stormtrooper fillets to go around. Saving Private Ryan. In the beginning, when they're clearing out the trenches and bunkers after taking the beach, 2 German soldiers come out with their hands up and yelling, seemingly trying to surrender. They're both shot dead, and the American soldier says they were saying, "Look, I washed for supper." It was actually in Czech, not German, and the man was saying, "Please don't shoot me. I'm not German. I'm Czech. I didn't kill anyone. I'm Czech." He was a Czech taken prisoner by the Germans and forced to fight for them. It made me sad when I learned that one. All the traps in Goonies are designed so that one person can make it through alive, especially if he or she is taken hostage and forced through the tunnels. The ship is rigged to be able to be sailed by a crew of 1, so the one person who makes it through the traps can sail away with the treasure for themselves. In The Dark Knight, the Joker tells Two-Face how he sees social order as the death of one being a tragedy only if the person is special enough. but people that are expected to die don't get attention from others. He refers to this as being part of the plan and established order. In real life, Heath Ledger died before The Dark Knight came out, and everyone talked about it. However, what a lot of people don't know is that Conway Wycliffe, a stuntman who worked on the movie, died as well when a stunt went wrong. The movie is dedicated to both men, but I don't need to tell you which one got more press. In Inglourious Bastards, the burning of the cinema at the end parallels the actual church burning by the Nazis at Oradour-sur-Glane. In fact, most of the movie sees us compelled to cheer on our protagonists as they commit war crimes and atrocities. And we feel permitted to enjoy this because they're morally superior and justified in their actions, given our knowledge of the vileness of their enemy and what they've inflicted upon our heroes. Yet, in reality, this is exactly the pervasive mentality the Nazis used to justify atrocities against the Jews and other minorities. A lot of people watch the iconic scene in Singin' in the Rain and assume the cop and pedestrians react the way they do because it's simply weird to sing and dance in the rain. However, the previous scene sets the time at around 2 a.m., so it makes more sense thinking they probably see him as a ridiculous drunkard who's finally going home after a night of binging. Shaun of the Dead. Spoilers ahead. The entire plot is revealed at the start of the movie. We'll have a Bloody Mary, first thing. Mary gets impaled and dies. A bite at the king's head. Philip is bitten. A couple, David and Di, at the little princess, Liz. A stagger when they pretend to be zombies. Down by the bar for shots, killing zombies. Talk about great filmmaking. The entire plot of Home Alone is set into motion when Kevin gets into a fight with his family over spilled milk. Fight Club. When Tyler Durden calls the narrator back in the phone booth, the camera slowly tracks towards the phone. On the left of the phone, a notice can be seen saying, "No incoming calls allowed." When Tyler and the narrator are on the bus, the long-haired guy pushes past Tyler without a word, then says "excuse me" as he pushes past the narrator. When Tyler and the narrator hit the first car with baseball bats, Tyler hits first, but the alarm is triggered only after the narrator hits. There are so many littered throughout the movie. In Pinocchio, there's a group of men kidnapping boys and somehow magically turning them into donkeys. And absolutely nothing is done to stop this. And it's not like the consequences of it go away. Pinocchio keeps the donkey ears and tail for the duration of the movie. The movie just ends and everyone forgets that this is still happening. Kind of a dark ending there, Disney. In The Fifth Element, the bad guy, Zorg, and the hero, Corbin Dallas, never actually meet, or even really know about each other. In fact, Corbin works for and is fired by Zorg via the cab company. The closest they get to each other is getting into/out of elevators on the cruise ship just before it blows up. In the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, not many people understand why Hal went crazy and murdered the crew of the Discovery, or anything that happened after that. Hal was programmed to relay information 100% accurately and completely, but the government types ordered Hal to keep the actual objective of their deep space mission secret, the mission to investigate the signal sent from the monolith on the moon to Jupiter orbit, all for petty political reasons. Hal took these conflicting orders and came to the only conclusion a computer could come to eliminate the conflict. He first decides to try to halt communication with Earth. He triggers a fault in the relay antenna, so the crew would need to take it offline. When he realizes that the crew is considering taking him offline for his odd behavior, he panics. The best solution now seems obvious. Eliminate the humans, and he won't have to conceal the details of the mission. Conflict averted. His logic is cold to a fault. Of course, Dave Bowman survives and is able to deactivate Hal. What happens next is sort of glossed over in the movie. David spends months in space alone, with zero communication with anyone, farther away from any other human being than anyone has ever been. He goes into a sort of autopilot mode. He does his daily duties and those of Frank, his dead co-pilot. He runs the huge ship with flawless efficiency. He practically becomes a machine himself. Nothing but the mission. After the remainder of his flight, he arrives at the monolith orbiting Jupiter. He flies a pod to the surface of it to study it, and realizes that there is no surface. It's a gateway. He enters the gate, and this is where the weird eyeball trippy effects heavy breathing takes place, and flies through a wormhole, a stargate, to a very far away star in a distant galaxy. On his way, he passes over some alien landscapes and some other weird spaceships. When he arrives, he lives out the rest of his human life. He spends like 30 plus years in that weird empty room, getting older in complete isolation. When he finally dies of old age, the aliens who created the monoliths, who placed one on Earth in prehistoric times and used it to teach hominids how to use tools, who buried one on the moon with an alarm that when it would be discovered would point the way to the Stargate, who created that room for David to live in, and where they fed him and studied him, gathered his consciousness and turned him into one of them, a being of energy and knowledge. He took the form of a floating baby and decided to revisit humanity. The whole film is a speculation on evolution of humanity, from the origin of man to the final result, from a creature who discovers tools to save their race, to a creature who relies on tools and machines to expand their horizons, to a creature who's nearly destroyed by those machines, to becoming something of a living machine, the best of both worlds, to a creature who is enlightened past such petty things as using machines to kill each other. Ariel from The Little Mermaid can write in English. We know this because she signed her name quite beautifully on a contract after she read it. So why didn't she attempt to communicate via written word with Eric? Instead of just writing in the sand, she immediately resorts to clumsy charades. In the 1990 version of Total Recall, the character Quaid, played by Schwarzenegger, gets a dream implant and either gets the girl and saves the planet by making Mars's sky blue, or he has a psychotic episode from an implant that went off course and is lobotomized. The movie was apparently designed to be specifically unclear which, so the viewer is compelled to see the movie multiple times. The tech who sets up the implant prior to a possible psychotic episode caused by the procedure says of the implant, "That's a new one, blue sky on Mars." District 9 is not in fact about apartheid. In Neil Blomkamp's short Alive in Joburg, on which D9 is based, there were similar interviews to those at the beginning of District 9. The difference is that all of those interviews were real. The filmmakers simply asked residents of Johannesburg what they thought of immigrants from Zimbabwe, and they received the remarkably hostile responses. The film isn't just a parallel to apartheid, but more about the current sentiment towards immigrants right now. In Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Ferris's constant complaint and his justification for many of his shenanigans is that his parents won't buy him a car. Toward the end of the movie, when Ferris's mom is driving his sister home from picking her up at the police station, there's a quick throwaway where mom complains that all this mess screwed up the deal she was working on, and that the money from the deal was supposed to be used to buy Ferris a car. Ferris ended up screwing himself out of the car he so desperately wanted. In Independence Day, one often mocked scene in the movie is when Jeff Goldblum uses a regular old MacBook to hack into the alien ship and disable with a virus. The obvious question is, how did they do this? It's simple. They cut a scene out, who knows why, where it was all explained that all of our modern technology, computers, microchips, everything, was all reverse engineered from the crashed fighter. Hence why Goldblum was able to hack into the alien ship. He knew the code already. Once you know this fact, those entire scenes make sense. This scene was shot and it was added to later versions of the movie, including the DVD release. But the original theatrical release and the VHS release did not have them. The main plot of The Matrix was supposed to use human brains as processors for machines, not power sources. That's why Neo could do all those things. He could interact with the code more fully. In Lilo and Stitch, Lilo looks after a fish named Pudge who she claims controls the weather. Lilo's parents died in a car accident due to bad weather. For me, it explains a lot of Lilo's behavior. In Pan's Labyrinth, it's real. It's not just a little girl's fantasy. She's actually a princess and everything that happens is real. Almost everything in the story can be explained by coincidence or imagination, except for one thing. At the end, the guard guarding her room is told to kill her if she leaves. That is the only exit and the windows are too high and barred. So the only way she could get out is if the chalk actually worked. This was confirmed by Guillermo del Toro. The chestbuster scene in the first Alien movie was almost completely ad-libbed. Scott wanted to get as natural a reaction as possible from the actors, so he didn't clue them in as to what was to happen. They were told something shocking was to happen in the scene, but not exactly what. The reactions you see as the blood sprays over everything are as real as they can get. The genie completely scammed Aladdin. Aladdin asked the genie to make me a prince. He then goes on to suffer for lying about being a prince and learns a valuable lesson about being truthful in himself. He asked to be a prince, not to look like one, not to have everything a prince has, to be an actual prince. He should have land and titles and a bloodline now. When Jafar wishes to become sultan, he becomes the sultan. The previous one is stripped of his land, even his clothes. Why didn't this happen for Aladdin when he made the exact same wish? In Pulp Fiction, when Butch had to go back to his house to get his watch, the reason Vincent didn't react to Butch making Pop-Tarts and just making general noise is because he thought Butch was Marcellus Wallace. Vincent thought Marcellus was back from getting food, which is why you see Butch randomly running into Marcellus. He's holding a box of food and coffee. Jack Nicholson's character from The Shining was originally to be played by Robin Williams, but Kubrick thought he was too crazy for the role. Let me say that again. Robin Williams was too crazy, so the alternative was Jack fricking Nicholson. In The Big Lebowski, Donnie is the physical manifestation of the movie's theme. If you think about it, nobody knows anything throughout the entire film. Bunny and the Nihilists think there's actual money out there. Mr. Lebowski thinks Bunny's actually been kidnapped. And obviously, the dude and Walter have no idea what's happening. You can see this in Donnie's character in a few ways. First, he's constantly told to shut up because he's out of his element and acting like a child that wanders into the middle of a movie and wants to know what's happening. Second, his character has absolutely no influence on the film's plot, which is unheard of when it comes to a character with that much screen time. And lastly, after everyone in the film finally figures out what's happening and ignorance is vanquished, Donnie dies. 300 is told by a Spartan, the soldier Leonidas sent away before the final battle, as a story to motivate other Spartans right before they charge at the ending credits, which is the real-life Battle of Plataea, where a united Greek force decimated the Persian army. This is why the film contains so many fantastical elements, such as bombs, elephants, giant monsters, why the immortals had fangs, and things like that. The whole story is just propaganda told to soldiers to make the Spartans seem superpowered and the Persians evil monsters. The implication is that much of it is exaggerated for dramatic effect so the soldiers would fight harder. Moulin Rouge. Satine dies from tuberculosis, which is a contagious disease. She very likely gave it to Christian. He'll probably die from it, while the Duke was spared from that. In addition, the livelihood of the Moulin Rouge was dependent upon the Duke's money. The scenes with Christian writing his novel are set against the backdrop of an abandoned and destroyed Moulin Rouge. Satine's choice to do things for love literally destroyed the lives of everyone she cared about. In Forrest Gump, Lieutenant Dan seemed furious that Forrest was awarded a Medal of Honor. However, as Lieutenant Dan was his first officer in his chain of command, he would have had to be the one that originally suggested it. Superman Returns. The boyfriend, Richard, played by James Marsden, is all around a very great fellow. He's a pilot, loving father figure, and all around a Superman. Superman, on the other hand, leaves Lois because, best explanation, he felt like it. He comes back years later and expects her to continue where they last left off, as if years haven't gone by. She hasn't found someone else, has a kid, and that he left her to go have a vacation in space. Of course, ultimately, despite it all, she chooses Superman, because no matter how great of a person you are, you don't compare to Superman. Some salt on the wound is the revelation that it was Superman's kid. The kid he left behind and left Lois to take care of on her own. Oh yeah, he also saves Superman's life. And Superman's like, thanks loser, I'ma still take your family away. What a jerk. The film Watchmen depicts how many different world events would have been with superheroes present, especially Dr. Manhattan. For example, the Vietnam War is won by the US in a week with Dr. Manhattan's help, and the famous photo of a sailor kissing a nurse when World War II ends becomes a picture of a female superhero kissing that same nurse. There are 10 million changes, many of them extremely significant, that all occur in world history because of the addition of superheroes. So at the beginning of the movie, there's a montage of superhero history with a scene of the Night Owl punching out a thug outside the stage door of a movie theater. But guess what? The signs in the background show the production in question to be Die Flirtema, the Bat. The venue is Gotham Opera House, and the couple emerging from the theater in the left side of the frame are presumably Martha and Thomas Wayne. They even threw in a Batman poster just to really drive the hint home. In the Watchmen universe, Bruce Wayne never becomes Batman because his parents aren't killed. In the 8th Harry Potter movie, during the scene when Harry and McGonagall confront Snape in the Great Hall, as Snape is escaping, he redirects one of McGonagall's spells to hit the Carrow twins who are standing behind him. He's trying to help Harry, while still not revealing his cover to Voldemort. The Land Before Time. Notice at the end, Littlefoot finds the Great Valley after running through a dark tunnel with a light at the end. He then finds this paradise, complete with his long-lost grandparents. He's dead. They all died, and they're in heaven together. This was originally planned to be explicitly stated, but then it was decided to be too dark an ending for children, so they made it symbolic instead. Forrest Gump when Jenny tells him he has a son. Throughout the whole movie, the viewer assumes that Forrest gets by relatively alright because he's mentally handicapped. No matter how tragic it gets, there's this little comfort one can take in understanding that he never fully appreciates how awful things can be at times. He's too simple to feel the tragedy he suffers when his life goes wrong. But when Jenny tells him he's a father, what's the first question he asks? Is he like me? And then it hits you that he understood all along. Every time Forrest's mistakes hurt himself and those around him. Every time he was too dumb for his own good. He understood that he had made himself and all the people around him suffer at times. Even though he always tried to do the right thing, far from simple, he understood how much suffering was caused by his handicap, and only admitted to it when he found out his son might have to carry the same burden. Starship Troopers is thought of as a mindless action movie, but there's a subtle subplot throughout the whole movie. The reason Earth goes to war is because of the meteorites sent there by the bugs on Clentathu, but it's hinted at in the movie that the odds of that actually happening are almost impossible. That would mean that the meteorites were just a natural phenomena that the government used as an excuse to attack the alien planet, which means the protagonists were not protecting Earth, but rather invading an innocent planet. Terminator. Kyle fell in love with a photo of Sarah Connor that he had in the future. A photo that's taken at the end of the film at the very moment she's thinking about how much she loves Kyle. The philosophy of the Jedi Order is a lie. They preach balance, but the entire focus of their existence is not establishing balance and peace between the light and the dark sides of the Force, but rather focusing on wiping one out while preventing themselves from being wiped out in the process. This is one of the reasons why an individual Sith appears to be so much more powerful than an individual Jedi. It's not that the dark side is inherently more powerful, it's that the force of the cosmos is trying to even the odds. This seriously changed my view on the entire Star Wars universe. Jareth is not in love with Sarah in the Labyrinth. Sarah is a teenager who's on the cusp of growing up. She feels lost because her father is remarried and they have a new baby together. She feels forgotten and ignored and taken advantage of, and resents her baby brother for stealing her father's love. She's also on the cusp of womanhood and wants attention from men, but is also so afraid of that attention. She has no idea what love is, so she makes her wish and the Goblin King takes her baby brother away. And Sarah gets to act out her fantasy where a powerful magical king is in love with her, a special flower, and will whisk her away from her boring life. Only she has no idea what love actually looks like. You can't dream something you've never experienced. Jareth acts as he's expected to act, because Sarah's the one controlling everything, since this is, after all, her fantasy. In the end, she realizes that she has no idea what being in love and being responsible are like, so she chooses to wake up and be a better big sister to her baby brother and stop being such a brat. It's a movie about growing up, not about love. In How to Train Your Dragon, Hiccup's acceptance as a Viking is dependent upon his ability to kill a dragon. After meeting Toothless, he decides that isn't really what he wants, and that dragons aren't actually evil. But then at the end of the movie, he kills a dragon, and is no longer ostracized by the rest of the Vikings. So not as much changed as you think it did. What's something a poor kid would understand, but would utterly confuse a rich kid? Waiting around in a laundromat. The ultimate example of why it's so expensive to be poor. You can't afford the initial capital of buying a washing machine, so you end up spending even more money at a laundromat over time. Watching the rest of the class go on class trips or vacations while you stay at home or at work, or even going to a school that offered this in the first place. I had no idea this was even a thing until I was in my 20s. Every time you get a little bit ahead, an extra $100 or so, and being able to relax and breathe a bit. Next day, something goes catastrophically wrong with the car or an appliance or an unexpected late charge on something you forgot about. It never ends. One step forward, two steps back. The guilt versus gratitude relationship fight you have when your friends share their food with you. Because on one hand, you never have enough money to buy enough food to be fully satiated. So that extra from your friends is awesome. But on the other hand, you understand how awful it is to not have enough food at lunch. And you don't want to put your friends in that position. Going to the library to use the internet. My mom and I often went with the car to the parking lot nearby outside with our crappy laptop to connect to the nearby unsecured Wi-Fi to be able to Skype with my grandma. It happened for about a year till she had enough money to buy a router. New means different, not unused. When you're getting new clothes, they're used from family or a thrift store. My cousins are upper middle class, and I went shopping with them during one of the only times I spent the night at their house. Not only were these 12-year-old girls astounded that my mom only gave me $10 to spend while there, they couldn't at all understand why I was checking the prices on everything we saw. Their parents just bought them whatever they wanted most of the time. My entire identity revolves around food. I use my spare fun money for food now. I give gifts of food. I take friends out to eat. I give people their favorite snacks and candy bars as little surprises. We never had enough as a kid. We went hungry every day. And now I express myself through food. I'll bring friends dinner. I'll bake people's favorites. I'll bring my coworkers entire casseroles. I'll take huge pots of soup to our neighbors. I'm getting emotional right now just thinking about how important the availability of food is to me. I have an 18-year-old coworker that doesn't eat lunch during break for our 12-hour shift. So I started packing twice as much. And I feed her the extra I bring. I just want all my friends and family to be full, to never have to feel hunger like my family did, like I did. I don't want that for them. Paying bills before the age of 18. Getting your paycheck and handing it over to your mom when you get home so the water and electricity stay on that month. Never seeing your gas tank above the midway line. Pushing oil changes until your car starts making strange grumbling noises at you. Wearing the same 2 pairs of shoes until they fall to pieces, and then visiting the thrift store for the next pair. Being freaking ecstatic that tonight mom's buying pizza for delivery because it's your only birthday wish. Don't get me wrong, I had a great childhood. My parents never let us forget that we were loved. So being poor wasn't something we really noticed, except when strangers or people at work and school treated us different for it. Buying food, not for taste or preference, but for the price point and how filling it is. There's food that tastes good because it tastes good, and then there's food that tastes good because of how affordable it is. Sugar sandwiches for dinner. Butter, sugar, and bread. We thought it was like dessert for dinner, but my mom told us recently it was because we didn't have any food. Being really young and getting excited about the power cut and lighting candles and things like that, when really it was because we couldn't afford electricity. Back in high school, I was getting flamed for having cheap shoes from Marshalls. Here's something along the lines of how it went. "Those shoes are ugly." I agree. I gotta wait for my next paycheck so I can grab some new ones. "Why don't you just ask your parents to buy you shoes?" "Because they gotta put money in more important places right now." "Wait, so your parents don't buy you new shoes?" "Nah, I gotta save up." Cue extreme look of confusion for the kid. The confusion of the kid when he realized that most parents don't buy their kids everything they want was something I won't forget. In typical high school fashion, he then proceeded to tease me for being broke. Also, explaining to others that the only time I left my home state was for family emergencies was something that they couldn't grasp either. How bad it feels when a non-poor kid, even up to adulthood, mentions doing something expensive casually, or worse, makes a big deal about you never doing it. Things like flying, going to another country, going to Disney World, going to a hibachi restaurant or fancy steakhouse, doing camps or programs that cost money at school or during the summer. "You never blank" seems so confusing to them that it's true, and never crosses their mind you might feel self-conscious about it. Hint, everyone does. Knowing how to sew as a necessity. I fixed countless shirts and pants, even my couch. Everyone needs to learn this. Putting water in shampoo bottles to make it last longer. No amount of wealth that I've had has ever made me change this habit. I mean, it's just wasteful to not get that extra bit, and is less effort than opening a new bottle. I was a poor kid who was lucky enough to go to a good high school. The downside of that was growing up next to entitled brats. I've seen a girl throw her brand new gold iPhone across the room and not bat an eye because her parents would buy her a new one. Sure enough, the next time I saw her, she had one. These are the same kids that crash the new cars they get for their birthdays, get manicures, facials, and eyelashes every week despite never working a day in their lives. On the other side, I was scared when I ripped the strap off the backpack I'd been using for 4 years. I sewed it up because I didn't want to stress my mom out with having to buy a new one for me. I used it for 2 more years through college until it finally kicked the bucket and I was able to get a new one. Not getting upset when clothes, shoes, or other items are, to them, ruined. If I had a hole in my shoe, or a stain or tear on my clothes, I had to live with it, at least for a while. I knew kids in the middle and upper classes that would get chewed out for stuff like that, but their parents would usually buy them new stuff right away. That wasn't the case for a lot of kids like me because it just wasn't possible. Most of the clothes I owned were hand-me-downs to begin with. Some of it was found in the garbage. Parents borrowing birthday money to help with bills or buying food and toiletries. Love them to death. They've always worked hard for me and my sister. Every term, our school would do a thing called Scholastic Books. It's like a catalog of books and other educational things that parents can go through, pick out what they think their child would like, and order them. The school gets a percentage of the sales and the kids get an education-filled Christmas unboxing every term. Almost every kid in my class would get at least one thing, except me. I was just sitting in the back of the class watching other kids showing off their new stuff to each other. One year, a kid left before the order came in and the teacher gave his book to me. Rich kids will never know the feeling of being poor, having it noticed, and not being shamed for it. It was the only time I ever got a book from Scholastic, and I still have it. Relaxing in an empty parking lot in your friend's car is a typical night out, because nobody has anything at home and don't want to be there anyways because it's too stressful. You can't just live within your means. I think that sometimes when people say this, they're talking about poor people who spend money on alcohol and cigarettes, or that nice car they just had to have but can't really afford. I remember Jamie Oliver was criticized once for saying that a lot of British working class were just drunks who weren't interested in eating proper food, and preferred to spend their money on getting drunk in pubs. That being said, I know it's not that simple. If you haven't been poor, then you don't really understand it. The actual process of looking at something in a store and debating whether or not it's really something they need or is it something they want before trying to see if they can find a cheaper version. Coming to school stinking because your parents couldn't pay utilities that month, as if you chose to be gross. We couldn't afford cable growing up, so ergo, I didn't see a lot of movies. I often get ridiculed as a 35-year-old for not seeing them. And I always get the, "How have you not seen these?" And now it's at a point where I don't have too much of a desire to see a kid's movie for the first time from 20 years ago. I'm not really complaining, because my mom did a lot to keep my childhood together, but most of my friends don't understand that not having cable cut off access to a lot of the references they remember so fondly. Going to the mall with friends, not buying anything, not trying anything on in case you damage it, not buying any food or snacks, and making excuses why you can't go see the movie with everyone else. Saying you left your phone at home so they don't see the old flip phone or first-gen smartphone you've been passed down, and leaving quickly without saying goodbye to anyone so they don't see your mom pull up in the ancient station wagon your family's had for the last decade. What it's like to eat spaghetti for over a year and a half straight. Other than my birthday, that is exactly what I've done and am doing. I hate it. I hate it so much. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Sorry, I had to have a moment. I stressed myself out. They call it intermittent fasting by not eating breakfast, but that's pretty standard to me how I grew up. Not eating breakfast, lunch, or dinner because there was no food. According to some other people I know, it's a lack of cleanliness. Don't know if that's the right word for it. An ex-neighbor of mine, older lady, requested me specifically to help clean her property and pack her stuff when she was moving. Apparently, she asked for me because she knew I'd understand in regards to the state of her house and the yard. I mean, she was right. My family also had a bit of a white trash redneck kind of property with all the trappings. But it didn't dawn on me that other people also did it. I wouldn't expect anyone who isn't from the country or didn't live on a street in the woods with no streetlights to understand the nuances of the way a redneck yard and house looks and operates. Yes, we have a bug problem, and at least 2 defunct broken cars sitting in the grass. But I promise we're not crazy stereotypes. It's safe, I assure you. I was 7 or 8 and my rich cousin, just a few years older, screamed at me because I didn't know how to put on a seatbelt. Last time I had entered a car, I still needed a baby chair. That the next excursion with the school is too expensive to be able to go and have fun with your friends. I remember I was acting like, that's for kids, I don't go do that. But I wanted to go, I just couldn't. Or being worried about starting the school year without books because they've changed them and they're not like last year's. And you need new books, and they're very expensive. When I was a small and nimble child, my father would slip me into the vents of his client's house to scare the rats out, whereupon my siblings would be waiting to bludgeon them to death with the family soup ladles. We were a whole family of ratters. We lived rats, killed rats, and when times were tough, ate rats too. Driving with the check engine light on all the time. Can't get a new car, can't get it fixed, but have to take it to get to work so you can make rent. Just drive and hope it doesn't stall or blow up. The take a penny, leave a penny honor system. I was a cashier at a gas station for many years. The people taking the change from the take/leave cup have hundreds sticking out of their wallet. The ones who actually need them will stand there checking every pocket and corner of their purse, run out to check under their car seat before accepting the change, and they come back to pay it the next day. How hard life really is, and that money 100% can buy happiness. The whole money can't buy happiness thing is just something the rich tell the poor to keep them placated. Money gets you financial security and products, which in turn makes you happy. Money can certainly buy happiness. Expiration dates are more like suggestions than fact. They have to set them earlier than they actually expect the food to expire so as to avoid complaint. Had a roommate throw out all of my and my other roommates' food because it was a week before the expiration date. She honestly didn't understand why we were livid. She thought she was helping. Learning skills to make do with what you have. I remember not having very much money growing up and needing to learn lots of computer and network related troubleshooting skills because I couldn't rely on my parents simply to buy a new computer or update the modem or router. We couldn't simply pay to have ISP technicians come out all the time, and my parents couldn't afford the time off to address those types of issues. Being afraid of going to the doctor or dentist. This isn't stemming from being afraid of needles or getting teeth pulled, but more for a concern of whether or not something that was found would be sufficiently covered by insurance, and weighing that against whether or not you truly feel bad. I remember having a really weak immune system at a certain point when I was 16 years old, and not wanting to go to the doctors until the pain was too unbearable. Turned out that I had shingles. Yes, I'm aware that it's extremely uncommon for someone that young to have, but yes, I did in fact get diagnosed with shingles, and I'm not mistaking it for something else. There was also a time where finals were approaching during my 3rd year in my major, when I was feeling some pain in my abdomen and reading up on my symptoms. I foolishly decided that my self-diagnosis was sufficient and stayed home to tough out what I suspected to be a kidney stone, rather than see a doctor, because I figured that they'd expect me to pass it on my own anyway. I ended up passing the kidney stone halfway through finals week. As someone who grew up in an environment that disincentivized the usage of healthcare, I really have to be mindful to make full use of it now that I'm older, and maintaining my health matters more. It's crazy how much small things matter when you're poor, and how little thought you're able to put into them if you're financially stable. Saving trash. Rich people don't bother with food scraps or the boxes things came in, because why would you store trash in your fridge or closet instead of getting rid of it now? One thing I don't think people understand is that being poor in an urban area sucks, but I'd argue in many ways, being poor in a rural area sucks even more. In my adult life, since I've escaped from the poor forgotten town I grew up in, I've met a lot of other people who grew up poor also. And the ones from larger areas, the story is like, oh, thank God we had things like the local Y or whatever after school tutoring program for poor kids, or teach music in the ghetto type stuff. And it's like, well, we didn't have any of that. You were just dirt poor. and no one knew your town even existed or gives a crap about it. So yeah, that's one thing I've heard from even other former poor kids. They'll ask things like, what community programs did you go to? Or something like that. And I have to explain, hey, we didn't even have that. We were just all poor out in the boonies with nothing around. And even our own state government pretended that part of the state doesn't exist. In the US, in February, you get better stuff than Christmas when the income tax check hits. We'd get new shoes and have cable for a couple of months. Even McDonald's. You don't ever get ice in your fast food drinks. You get less soda and you don't need your drink to stay cold if you drink it fast, since they keep it cold in the fountain dispenser. Cooking everything, including pizza, from scratch, because restaurants and pre-made food are too expensive. On the rare occasion food was purchased from a restaurant, it was either because my father was out of town, or we were buying the leftover cold chicken, not the freshly cooked hot chicken from the local chicken shack. Group daycare. All of the poorer kids at my elementary school all went to the same group daycare when they were preschool. Kids with richer parents either had a stay-at-home parent or had their own personal babysitter. Fruit juice, even the fake kind, is a luxury. Boxed mac and cheese with cut-up hot dogs baked into it is a fine casserole. Salvation Army sells prom dresses that are in great shape. Duct tape on shoes isn't just a fashion statement, it's a necessity. Space heaters are for when your gas utility gets cut off, and all the windows are open because the electricity got cut off and we need the light in the house. There are more, but that's a pretty comprehensive list from me. Navigating higher education when your parents didn't go to college. So much of your success in college is based on your ability to utilize on-campus resources, and meeting with faculty and staff about opportunities and for assistance. That all wasn't totally obvious to me, and I feel like it really inhibited my success in school. I remember having to turn down an offer for an internship in DC because it was unpaid, and I didn't know there was an office at school that would help find funding to live there. Getting the financial aid office and the financial service office confused on a regular basis and feeling super stupid because of it is also a fond memory. Doing all your own work on your house and learning how to do all this work on your own. Bathroom leak? Dad needs to learn how to do basic plumbing. Need to do some basic wiring? Dad needs to learn basic electrical. Need to add a new addition to the house? Dad learns basic carpentry. Need the roof reshingled? Dad learns how to reshingle a roof. Broken window? Dad learns how to install new glass or replace an entire window. By the time I was 12, I was learning how to do carpentry, mechanics, wiring, plumbing, construction, landscaping, metalwork, welding, building, renovations, and repairing. I learned how to drive a truck at 13, tractor at 14, and heavy equipment at 18. By the time I was 20, I could fix and maintain anything in my own house. By the time I was 30, I could literally build an entire house and everything that goes with it on my own. I wasn't the best, the fastest, or the most efficient, but I could do just about anything with my own hands. I grew up in a remote native community where we had no easy access to construction workers, plumbing, electricians, or mechanics. We had to learn how to do all these things on our own. It's amazing what you can learn to do when you're forced to. Getting excited about being able to have McDonald's. We used to be so poor, my two sisters and I were practically giddy that we were able to share 2 Happy Meals between us 3 and my mom. Otherwise, it was soup kitchen and discount food. Coupons. I have a friend that's really rich and I love this show that's all about couponing, and she asked what a coupon was. I was shocked. Watching your mom push food away to you or your dad, even though she was still hungry. Also, your parents sacrificing their health for yours. We didn't have low-income healthcare, and while I always got proper medical care, my parents did without. I grew up in communism, and let me tell you, Romania in the 1980s would confuse most of you. Hot water stopped running after 9 p.m. No hot water between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. the next day. Hot water between 6 to 8 a.m. and 3 to 9 p.m. on most days except Saturday and Sunday. We did not have 2 days off every weekend. We went to school Monday through Saturday. Every second day, I would wake up at 5:45 and be in line at a shop about 500 miles away from my house to buy milk. The queue would be variable, but some days the milk would finish before I got a chance to buy it. Shops did not have milk butter, fresh bread, or any of the basics. At random times in the evening, electricity would turn itself off, and sometimes it stayed off for hours. This was part of our dictator's plan to save energy. It got so bad that as a med student, because I had to study for exams and refused to do it by candlelight, I made a chart with times and regions where electricity was cut for about a month. Then I would make sure not to be in that neighborhood when electricity was expected to be cut. So I ended up visiting people who had electricity so I could study. Luckily, they understood and left me alone. I saw a banana for the first time at age 23. I sat in line for 4 hours to buy oranges outdoors in freezing temperatures. To enter the US Embassy in Romania in 1992, I had to line up for 18 hours. Need I continue? When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.